Kenmore City Council is now in session. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Culver.
Present.
Councilmember Marshall.
Present.
Councilmember Sassen.
Here.
Councilmember Shrubnik. Here. Councilmember Lutsis.
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Here.
Mayor Herbig.
Here.
All present.
Next on the agenda is our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the city of Kenmore is situated upon the ancestral lands of the Snohomish, Snoqualmie, Soxhawtl, Duwamish, Stillaguamish, Tulalip, Suquamish, Muckleshoot, and other tribes who are part of the Coast Salish peoples. We recognize and express our deepest respect for their enduring stewardship and profound relationship with this land, which they have cherished and protected since time immemorial. We honor the first peoples, acknowledge their vibrant cultures, and commit ourselves to learning from their wisdom in our journey to promote justice, equity, and mutual understanding. We pledge to stand alongside these communities in acknowledging past injustices and working towards a future that respects and celebrates the diverse heritage of this land. Now, if you'd all please stand and join me in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Unless there are any objections, the agenda will stand approved. Seeing no objections, the agenda is approved as published. Next, we have a proclamation for Safe Paddling and Boating Week. Whereas the city of Kenmore is bounded by 7.8 miles of shoreline along Lake Washington, the Sammamish River, and Swamp Creek, and whereas a significant number of Kenmore residents of all ages engage in recreational boating, and whereas water recreation activities such as paddling and boating significantly contribute to the quality of life in our community, providing opportunities for enjoyment, exercise, and relaxation. And whereas ensuring the safety of individuals engaging in these activities is of great importance to prevent accidents, injuries, and loss of life. And whereas with the surge of people engaging in paddling activities since 2020, many without training, paddling fatalities now constitute more than 25% of all boating fatalities nationwide. And whereas education and awareness regarding safe paddling and boating practices are essential for promoting responsible water recreation and preserving the well-being of participants. And whereas the mission of the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary is to promote and improve recreational boating safety by teaching safety courses and conducting vessel safety checks. Now, therefore, I, Nigel Herbig, Mayor of the City of Kenmore, on behalf of the Council, do hereby proclaim May 18th through the 24th, 2024 to be Safe Paddling and Boating Week throughout the City of Kenmore. We encourage all residents to wear life jackets and practice safe paddling and boating. And here to accept that is Vice Division Commander Dale Vodica and Assistant District Staff Officer Mike Hurliak. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes. So we'd like to thank the council.
Please activate your microphone.
Which microphone? Oh. Should be on, they say me? Okay. Sorry, I'm not a public speaker. We'd like to thank the City Council once more again for passing issuing a proclamation. We'd also like to thank the council for your recent city ordinance in regards to paddlecraft. We understand that that's been very helpful to reduce deaths on at least the north end of Lake Washington. So other than that, we're also available if you would like. I recently had some interaction with your Parks Department for some signage. So if you have any other things you'd like to talk to us about, we'd be more than happy to work with you. And okay. And for those that are in the room, the Coast Guard Auxiliary is the civilian volunteer branch of the Coast Guard. We are the unpaid force multipliers when the reserve doesn't quite make it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you like to join us over by the flags for a photo? All right, Mr. City Manager, where's the fun?
Well, to answer that question, I'd like to turn it over to Nicole Suarez and Stephanie Lukash.
Do you want to go first? Or would you go? Hi, Nicole Suarez, Events Specialist with the City of Kenmore. Just here to share a little fun about recent Earth Day celebrations that we had throughout the month of March in Kenmore to celebrate Earth Day. So the city-sponsored event was an Earth Day celebration event at Rhododendron Park. We had over 20 vendors come out, all with a mission to provide educational materials and activities to promote sustainable living in Kenmore. So it was a cold and weary, dreary day, but it was still well attended and lots of engagement happening at this event. At the event, we also hosted a work party with our parks lead, Quinn. And we had about 30 volunteers in total come out to spread mulch, beneficial mulch throughout the park over our plants or near our plants and trees. We provided water, coffee, and fruit for the volunteers. We had 3 other volunteer events, work parties throughout Kenmore, 2 at Log Boom Park. One with companies can work together and come together and volunteer. We had Northwest Electric and Solar at Log Boom and Pfizer at Log Boom. And then the Snow King Watershed Council, which is a group that does regular park cleanups. And they did their Earth Day work party event at Wallace Swamp Creek Park. We also had event partners for this event. We partnered with the Kenmore Senior Center and they opened up their annex and created some very fun and engaging craft activities using make your own reusable pot for seedlings, planting pots in those pots that they made, and then make your own bags for the popcorn that they gave away as well. And then they had some crafts on display. And if anyone is unaware, there are pickleball courts at Rhododendron Park. So they have supplies at the North Shore Senior Center, at Kenmore Senior Center. And so they had those up for the event as well. We also partnered with the Kenmore Heritage Society, so a big thanks to them for providing a scavenger hunt activity for the event where attendees got to go around and visit the booths, different vendor booths, and they had a make your own boat activity and a little float demonstration. And we also held nature walks through with a guided leader at the event as well. And then finally, 2 of our staff members of the Environmental Services Department were there. They brought one of the environmental fleets for a hands-on display. They also had their solar panels on display at a fun poop toss game that's at several of our events. And they had 2 of their Climate Action Advisory Committee volunteers there to provide information and giveaways as well.
All right, the other Where's the Fun event tonight, it was the 23rd Annual McMaster Heritage Awards Ceremony, which is put on by the Kenmore Heritage Society. It was held last Wednesday, May 1st at Inglemore Golf Club. And it was a really fun event, as you can see from the sold out crowd that were there in the room. The 2024 McMaster Award recipient was Katrina Rose. She's actually here in the audience with us tonight. And then So congratulations to Katrina, who also will be seeing a little bit more of her later. The 2024 Emerging Leader Award was Camille Pierce. Camille is a rising junior at Inglemoor High School, very impressive young person, and it was fun to hear about her. And then the brand new 2024 Making a Difference Community Service Award was given to Steve Holmes, who is the chair of the Kenmore Business Alliance. And those three winners are there in that picture you'll see up on the screen. So it was a wonderful event. So congratulations to the winners, and really appreciate the Kenmore Heritage Society and Suzanne Greathouse in particular for their work in putting on that event. We even have Lou, the photographer, here in the audience. He took the pictures you're seeing up on the screen. So thank you, Lou, as well. And you can see Hank Heron was in attendance, of course. So that was fun. You can see Suzanne peeking out over Hank's shoulder there in the left picture. So thank you.
Hank even got a name tag. Love it. Well, thank you very much. Next on the agenda is public comment. We want to welcome everyone to the council's meeting. Please address your comments to the mayor and the council. Because we have more than 20 people signed up, folks will have 2 minutes per speaker. The clerk will call your name when it's your turn. The presiding officer may choose to alternate between in-person and online, although I don't think I will today. Please state your name and city of residence and keep within the allotted time. To make everyone feel welcome and safe here, please refrain from booing, clapping, heckling, yelling, or other interruptions. This meeting is recorded for transparency. Thank you for being here and for sharing your input respectfully. Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 23 guests wishing to speak. We'll take the first 5 in this order: Nathan McDonald, Stacy Valenzuela, Patrick O'Brien, Trish Lundeen, and Mary Jo Blana.
Nathan McDonald, Kenmore citizen. The only cult you can't see is the cult you're in. An example of this is the Financial Sustainability Task Force, one member of which publicly stated, and I quote, "A group of you have established your own January 6th mob to storm the Capitol on occasion, but I'm not convinced that this relatively small cohort of angry NIMBYs is representative of the values of Kenmore residents generally." Mendacious histrionics aside, this member's statement is indicative of the system the city has implemented when it comes to furthering its policy goals by delegating them to its hand-picked Red Guards. What other explanation could there be for such an absurd finding that our city does not have a spending problem, but rather a revenue problem? Second, and far more concerning, is the city's inferred approval of the quoted statement, which has equivocated the unlawful chaos of January 6th with an electorate exercising its First Amendment right to freely and peacefully speak at an open meeting designed to solicit its opinions and positions on the issues. Apparently, it's only democracy when your favored viewpoint is victorious. This entire construct is a charade engineered by the Kool-Aid drinkers who love the flavor and the power such a cult affinity bestows. In a time of record inflation and unaffordability, you apparently want to burden those who can least afford it with your utopian visions and unproductive virtue signaling by removing core city services from the proposed budget and instead making them optional value-added services. Those of you in favor of these shenanigans are pathetic. You can have affordability or you can have your activist pet projects, but you can't have both. Harry Truman once said, "I never did give anybody hell. Just told the truth, and they thought it was hell."
Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. Credit needs to go to the residents working so hard in many ways to preserve our Kenmore treasures. Why is it that a few clubs only open to a few residents are not required to pay rent? The Kenmore Row Club, 4 years later, needs to reimburse the loan default to the city taxpayers of $560,000 and be evicted from the boathouse. The facility could be rented out to a reputable company, possibly Popcot Club or Cascade Rowing instead, that can pay their own expenses, leased to the city, being a viable source of income instead of being a financial burden. How do these clubs take priority over thousands of residents that pay their dues, yet will be charged for picnic shelter use that their taxpayers, all tax dollars already paid for, and were promised the use of facilities under waterways and walkways in the pro-levy funding? Only non-Kenmore clubs, businesses should be charged for any reservations or use. Why was the award-winning Mercy Bastyr joint submission of 30% AMI senior housing overlooked for others? We can see that the project that was submitted gave 1 million to the architect, developer, and permit fees, why only $500,000 would go to construction. The city needs to stop wasting funds, period. It is the job to stay within budget. It is the job to charge entities to cover maintenance and costs. It is the job to provide for the public, not just a few clubs. It is the job to collect outstanding debt. Why is the will of the people being ignored again and again? How many times will the outcome of a handpicked task force of criteria be misconstrued at the direction of a few staff, rather than be inclusive of the input and direction of involved residents? You know who we are.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien.
Pat O'Brien, test. Can you hear me? Pat O'Brien, City of Kenmore. First of all, I feel like I'm testifying against Boeing at a Senate hearing. I hope I make it to the parking lot. This is totally serious because our city manager, his first few years here, feigned that he didn't know things, and then he continued on the course that he laid and knew very well what he was doing. And examples of the wasteful spending are in that memo that just came out. And that is a clear signal that he wants to be fired or moved somewhere else, because that is incompetence at its height. And he is responsible for the city's budget and the employees, and he has failed us. So it's time for Rob Carlinzi to move on. The $30 million or more spent on the maintenance facility, I can generate an affidavit stating that they spoke with the owner of the old firehouse that had been reconstructed for use as a school, and we could have had that for $3 million, not $30 million. So I believe that that was an insider deal. I personally believe it. And further, when you see the plan of the park at Lake Point, that's property we don't even own. We haven't seen any significant testing of dioxins, PCBs, lead, radioactivity, and that off-gassing there can bring those toxins to the surface. So anybody that wants to play soccer or baseball out there, think about the kids' health before you send them out to a known hazardous waste dump. I don't say this lightly. I like Carlinzi as a person, but I really think his leadership has failed himself and the taxpayers at Kenmore. Thank you.
Trish Lundeen, Mary Jo Blana has decided not to speak. So Lundeen will be followed by Carl Michaelman, Nick Van Brecken, Zach Koopmans, Laura Hodge, and Jim Myers.
Hello, Trish Lundeen, Kenmore resident, 25 and a half years, about as long as Kenmore has been incorporated. We, as a parent, we need ball fields, but I do not think that they should be on the waterfront. I don't know what's going to happen to the Lake Point waterfront area, but we already have parking constraints with Log Boom Park and the bike trails, and we're getting a lot of public use. Ball fields require a lot of parking, and we don't need to locate those on the waterfront. We could partner with other parks. We could partner with schools, and I know that that's politically really hard to do, but politics is hard. So you've got a lot of elementary schools in the area that could really help that problem. It'd be a whole lot cheaper too. Shoreline restoration, I didn't know about any chemicals, but certainly that's a concern. But I'd love to see, community use of the waterfront, maybe even a dog area. A lot of dogs like to swim. People can come down there, and that's it. I'll return 52 seconds. Thank you.
Good to see everybody smiling. Hi, Carl Michaelman, City of Briar, but I own Michaelman Insurance Group in Kenmore. Anyways, I think what's happening is, when it comes to spending, it's becoming a really big concern. And what's happening with this spending and this taxing and everything else, it's to a point where enough's enough. I'll give an example as business goes for as usual. Went ahead and you did your retreat. How much did that cost us in Leavenworth? I don't know the number. I can ask for public records. Okay, spend the money. It just seems like we have a beautiful room here. You guys could have stayed here and done it to save some money, but it's spending as usual. What's happening is in the situation of all this money getting spent, I found out last week, I guess I'm getting sidewalks near my office. And I don't know what the cost is, $1 million something or whatever. But here's where I'm scratching my head. For me personally, oh, that's really cool. Okay. But if I look at the bigger picture is, if you're talking about we need help with affordable housing, with the homeless, what in the world are we bringing sidewalks into my place? I know different monies are different pots, but the problem that I'm running into when I write my check and everybody else write, it's one check. Lastly, but not least, I'm still on this little high pedestal of where our governor called us feckless and our Constantine called us irresponsible. I had a talk with Mr. Culvert last week. He's lobbying to, get all this out of our hands, but he said it was okay. It was okay for Inslee to call us feckless. It's okay for Constantine to call us irresponsible. This is the wrong way to go here, folks. You're
Thank
supposed to be
you.
working for us. Thank you.
All right. Hello, my name is Nick Van Buken. This is my son, Finn and Brecken, and I'm a local soccer coach and a stream restoration engineer that have done projects in Kenmore. Our city does not have a sports complex like our neighbors. And so thank you for engaging us with public outreach for input. If you notice, facilities really unite communities and they attract commerce. And frequently the local fields are pretty packed, which shows that they mean a lot to our communities.
Sports are proven to improve mental and physical health. So it's not just for uniting communities, but it would be benefiting to the individuals that would be using those fields.
Please develop the Lake Point property into a sports field.
Thank you for considering.
Can we get your city of residence for the record?
Kenmore?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Evening. My name is Zach Koopman. I'm a resident of the city of Kenmore. I'm also a baseball coach in North Lake Little League, as well as the scheduler for North Lake Little League. So I procure all of the fields and schedule all the games. Who we are as North Lake Little League, we serve around 700 kids in the Kenmore and Bothell areas. Our borders are within all of Kenmore and incorporated and slightly unincorporated Bothell. And we serve boys, girls, teens, special needs via our Challengers division, as well as low income via scholarships, full scholarships for league season. So as scheduler procuring these fields, we have 5 sources of field. NSD, Bothell, Bastyr, Forest Grin, and Kenmore. Orleans is the only field that Kenmore has that provides us, or that is provided to us. Great field, but just if we were to lose, say, Bastyr University and or Forest Grin, our season would be gone. So that's something to consider. I have heard comment about NSD, of course, new color fields. What I would comment on that is they don't serve rec leagues or NSDs. So the $1 million field that was put in Arrowhead cannot be used for games because dugouts are in a creek and spectator seating is in a creek. That is a beautiful $1 field with backstop. So considering for the Lake Point project, thank you for your time.
Hi, good evening, City Council. Thank you for giving me time to speak. Laura Hodge Kenmore. As everyone is aware, Lake Point has been a very challenging discussion topic for years over what should be done with Lake Point's land. While we can agree Lake Point parcel has outstanding views of Lake Washington, it's also contaminated landfill that comes with a very expensive price tag to clean up and stabilize as required in order to legally build on that parcel. Given Lake Point's failed proposal history, which always circles back to the costs of cleanup and stabilizing the land, I'm at a point where I can't realistically envision anything else at Lake Point other than a recreational park complex. That recreational park complex that I envision could include an open park area with picnic tables and barbecue pits, a paved perimeter coastline walkway, couple ball fields, because those are much needed items, maybe a tennis or pickleball court, outdoor amphitheater for concerts and movie nights, and a small community building that would house concessions. A pool idea was brought up recently on Kenmore Neighbors. While a pool would be great, pools are expensive to maintain as is, so a pool maintenance cost would have to be factored in. Maybe the community building could be a recreational community building that includes a pool and would have something like this. To me, the problem with Lake Point is that Kenmore does not have the money to buy the parcel at this time. It's a privately owned parcel. It takes money to even create a park complex if that's even just an open green area. We can't keep raising property taxes on homeowners so the city can buy a land to make a park. We first need to focus on reversing the city budget shortfalls. One way to do that, to address the budget shortfalls, is to focus on attracting more business to Kenmore, which would help much needed revenue. So wish list items like a future park at Lake Point could be a possibility. And then you also have partnerships that could be public-private partnerships that could be available. So let's be prudent about what we're going to do with Lake Point. Thank you.
Jim Myers, followed by Justin Woods, Linda O'Brien, Juliana Pooley, John Hendrickson, and David Dorian.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Jim Myers. This will be my the 29th year that my family and I have lived in Kenmore, and like many others, I'm here to speak on Lake Point. As we all know, it's really the last major piece of shoreline that's undeveloped in all of Lake Washington, and clearly there are many ideas about how to use it, and whether it's retail or whether it's recreation. All of them are obviously expensive, not only for the acquisition, but for the development and also for the annual maintenance. I have my own ideas, but I'll let sort of democracy drive it to its end. And I'm here really just to speak on the process. And I think there have been some examples in the past where perhaps the public has not been as informed as they might wish, maybe through their own negligence, maybe just through miscommunication. So I'm here just to, plead that the process be transparent, that we understand the costs, that we understand where the money's coming from, what those sources are, and how likely they are to happen. There are environmental considerations, so clearly testing before any check gets signed is sort of a definite prerequisite. God, 16 seconds, gotta go. So we need a stepwise process. It needs to be rational, and it needs to have logical checkpoints where we can evaluate the process and bring that forward. Thank you.
Hello, Justin Woods, City of Kenmore. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and the council for the time to speak. I have a family with 2 young girls. They are preschool and elementary school age. We love our parks. We love the parks in the city of Kenmore. Their favorite park is Rhododendron Park. And I've got to tell you, we feel very blessed. But I think that as I look at the Lake Point parcel, how special it is, how unique it is impossible for me to think that all the money that needs to go into soil remediation, all of the money that needs to go into funding and building something like a park, it just doesn't feel like if it was a park alone, it would be worth it. That needs to be a mixed use or sports field or some other facility to supply the city of Kenmore with opportunities that we do not have today. Things like going out to boutique shops or things like going to sports games. These are all things I have to go to Bothell or Lake Forest Park or Shoreline to get to today. And as I think about raising a family here, I'll live here the next 20, 30, 40 years maybe if I'm lucky. And my kids will grow up here. They go to school, the public schools here. Again, we feel very blessed. I want them to be able to engage within this community and within this space in opportunities that they don't have today. So I think about things like the swimming pool, for example, as one of the things that's been discussed. And I'm very dismayed by the feasibility study that I read from last fall that basically in short term says Kenmore's not a possibility, but we'll just go give it to Shoreline. That's cool. Now I realize there's a partnership between 3 cities and it's much more complex than that. I don't have time for nuance, but the point is, I think that we need to really look into things like Lake Point for opportunities that the city of Kenmore does not have today. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Linda O'Brien. I've been a resident since 1995. Mayor Herbig and council, thank you for letting me talk today. I just am, as a long-term property owner here, I've just become very concerned at the amount of asks of property owners. I think the city needs to get back to the basics and get rid of all the fluff. When you guys sent out that financial budgeting analysis tool, I think the thing that was glaringly obvious were the areas that you guys can actually cut that would be significant savings were locked out. So as a constituent, we weren't able to manipulate those. I had the opportunity to sit in on the human services update earlier, and the number one thing that people are asking for is affordability and housing. And then you guys are proposing all these property tax levies. So to me, that's a disconnect. She's saying, people can't afford to live here, and then you guys are asking for more taxes. So that's a disconnect. The other disconnect is you guys rate up all the utility taxes, and now your solution is, okay, for people that need money, we're going to set up a rebate program to give it to people that need this. So there's a big disconnect between what you guys say and what you do. And I think you need to really take a look within yourselves and make cuts. I mean, I go to grocery outlet now. I might have to cancel cable. I mean, we're all having to make cuts, and you guys do too. So please make the necessary cuts. Thank you.
Hi, Juliana Pooley, City of Kenmore. I want to go on the record and say thank you to Tamby Cork and the outstanding human services presentation that was held about an hour ago. I know she gave this similar presentation to you last month. I'm really supportive of the City of Kenmore during outreach and collecting our own data and catering support services directly for our own population's needs and vulnerabilities that's unique to our city. I was really proud to hear a presentation from Tamby, and I hope that we continue to gather information like this and create programs and systems that are catered for our residents. I've also been following the national, state, and county funding changes that have trickled down to negatively impact our city's financial budgets. I recognize that the City of Kenmore's budget does not operate in a vacuum, and that our budget is not simply yielding to one decision by our city manager, or one decision by all of you, or one decision by one group, but that our city budget is how it is because of national, state, and county decisions. These also impact me at my day work as well. And I just want to say that I hope that the city can be proactive in finding a diverse avenues for increasing our city revenue, and also be really bold in offering all the waivers, discounts, and sliding scale options for our low income and vulnerable neighbors. I want our city to have a sustainable budget, but I want it to be inclusive and accommodating for those who are feeling vulnerable, financially fragile and vulnerable. Thank you so much, Council.
John Hendrickson, Kenmore, Washington. I'd like to say that, cutting our speaking time down to 2 minutes is a good example of how little respect that you guys have for how little respect you have for the citizens of Kenmore here. I would also like to say, Rob Carlinzi, I think I am concerned about the spending, but you have to take a complete inventory of all the good that he's done here and balance it out. Because really the council's responsible for the spending. I want to address two fundamental concepts that were ignored by the city staff and their leadership of the task force, namely the number of employees we can afford and whether or not we're a contract city. In 2020, Kenmore had a financial crisis, was resolved with a task force for an 8-year solution. 4 years later, we have the same financial crisis. You guys got an award from the state and you plastered it all over the place, a great award for that success with significant tax increases. And here we are again. Problem is 4 years later, we're in crisis. And I believe it's going to be a perpetual crisis if you don't face these two fundamental concepts that were laid out when we incorporated back in '98 in this feasibility study that King County gave to us. And in that study, the two issues are, how many employees can we afford? Are we a contract city? That study said, in order for us to be sustainable, same cost, same service, that we'd have to operate with a lean core city staff. By having a lean city staff, we could afford public safety improvements on roads primarily. We emphasize it does not appear the city would have such a degree of revenue could increase municipal employees. In 2020, our salary and benefits was 5.8 million. 4 years later, it's 8.7 million, 49% increase. And I'll have to email you the rest amount of time because you guys don't respect
Thank you.
us.
David Dorian, followed by Kara Macias, Brent Smith, Teresa Dunning, Laura Nordyke, and Elizabeth Mooney.
Good evening, Council. David Dorian, Kenmore. I think I moved to speak a bit about community this evening. It's great to see so many people here and particularly good to see the student athletes. I think it'd be great if we can find a way to support them and what they're looking for. And I think as a city, it's really important that we activate community. We saw that with the volunteers cleaning up the parks that we have. I'll speak a little bit about Arts of Kenmore in a moment, but we've also seen with people turning up and volunteering for the city. It makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable when some of our citizens who volunteered their time are able to be berated from this podium. I don't think that's appropriate. It's different when it's you as elected officials, but when our community are volunteering their time, I think they deserve to be defended a bit more. Honestly, I attended the financial sustainability planning town hall. It was an event that had opinions from lots of different places. And the only time that an opinion was shut down was when it was inappropriately shouted out across the room at other people who were, again, volunteering their time. So I kind of think we need to stand up for each other a bit more. As a city, if we don't want to have to spend a lot directly as a city, we need to activate as a community and bolster each other when we're doing things to push the community forward. Otherwise, we are dependent on services that the city provides and have to put tax money towards. On that front, I do want to say a word about Arts of Kenmore. We're going to have a presentation for them later. I was just amazed when I sat down with Sarah a few months ago now to hear what Arts of Kenmore does for our community and for the schools, as well as for artists in the community and families in the community. I had no idea, and I was kind of blown away by hearing everything that they do. So I wanted to just mention that here as a statement to you. I'm sure you all know about that, but you'll hear more later as well. And yeah, just generally a statement about let's stand up for each other as a community instead of tearing each other down. Thank you.
Kara Macias, Kenmore. Good evening, Council.
I sat through your 2 days of your offsite retreat, and there were just a few things that I wanted to flag and note that kind of came top of mind. The preamble to your priorities, thank you, Rob, and our Public Works Manager for pointing those out. Those are our must-haves. Those are our absolute must-haves, no questions. As we're sifting through this FSP, those items should always be top of mind. Everything else is a need to have, we'd like to have. I'd love to have fireworks shows. I'd love to have movies in the parks. But you know what? The priorities at the top, the preamble, they come first, always, every time. The TOD regs, your development manager noted that they had seen some stall from development because of the updated TOD regulations. It went over everybody's head. Not a single question was asked after that. For the next 2 days, it's a missed opportunity. Dive into it. Find out why. Ask some questions. What have you heard? Nobody asked anything. The staffing bandwidth, I'm shocked that this is all surprising. They are at their absolute max, and you will lose critical staff that you need to get things done. We have an appetite that is bigger than our stomachs right now, and we really need to pay attention to that. We're not. I'm also hoping that maybe we can get a little bit more proactive. It seems that we're reactive in every decision making that we're doing. We're reacting. We're adding taxes to low income, but we're going to add a navigator to help them dig out of the hole that we created for them. That's not proactive, that's reactive. Thanks.
Hello, Council, City Manager. I'm here to talk about primarily the Metropolitan Park District. But first I want to say, I know you recently discussed and wanted more information on the B&O tax, and it was low on the Financial Sustainability Plan Task Force list. Although I'm not a fan of that, and I feel like it's taking away the direct relationship between finances and the council, I do hope that you will realize that at a moment when I feel like are making progress in wanting to improve the economic development side, I think adding a B&O tax would be the wrong thing to do. So that's on that. Now, with regards to Lake Point and a potential Metropolitan Park District, obviously I'm supportive of ball fields wherever we can put them. But I also know that our options are limited, and this has been an area that's been talked about for a long time. And if you do go forward, I hope that you'll be very transparent as far as what you expect to be there on the site. And if you're not going to put it there, then let us know, because quite honestly, that will have an impact on the voting. And the other thing is the Metropolitan Park District does allow, obviously, I think it would probably be set up because it's within the city of Kenmore for the council to be the board members of it. However, many MPDs throughout the state have at-large elected board members. And I think a responsible thing for transparency and just effective governments would be to seriously consider having a combination of council members and 2 or 3 elected positions. I think it would help the process, and it would help build confidence that the community is connected to it. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, City Council, Teresa Dunning, resident of Kenmore since 1989. I'm here today to talk about the financial plan. You sent out this most wonderful ability for us to each contribute and share with you our thoughts on how to bring the financial plan into budget. Many of us did that, and we submitted it to you without raising any taxes. There are cuts that need to be made. We'd love to have everything. Man, I loved hearing about fun. Fun is great, but we can do things in this city that are not that expensive that can be fun. But you have to start looking at all these nice to have projects, and some of the ways that you do budget, we were not allowed to look at or address any of the staffing, any of that issue within city management. And I am telling you that even without looking at that, I could balance your budget and give you $2 million back. So I say to you, not everything has to be done. Sometimes when you're in a deficit, you take a percentage off of each category and you operate within that category for a period of time until things get better. For me to start paying more taxes is not helpful. For the rest of our community to continue to have to be burdened with this is not helpful. So I ask you again to relook at the budget and decide what you can cut and eliminate. Thank you.
Laura Nordike, followed by Elizabeth Mooney, Danielle Olson, Jeff Chisholm, and Corey Holder.
Good evening. Laura Nordike, a resident of Kenmore for 26 years, president of North Shore Youth Soccer Association. I'm here to, one, thank you all for this opportunity to speak with you. I submitted a letter, a United Coalition letter on March 15th, signed by myself, the president of North Lake Little League, the president of North Shore Girls Slow Pitch Softball Association, president of North Shore Girls Lacrosse, and the vice president of Inglemore Lacrosse Club. So I appreciate that recognizing that you received that letter. Three key points from the letter in support of Lake Point and multi-sports fields. Our youth leagues represent thousands of players in the community that recreate in the city of Kenmore. We have a strong commitment to diversity and access to all, including scholarship programs, and we provide special programs for kids in needs and kids who have development and disability challenges. Lake Point is a unique opportunity that represents flat land in our city. A few years ago, when there was opposition against building out St. Edward State Park, those folks that were in opposition pledged strong support for a field at Lake Point. This would be a huge contributor to our city's quality of life and economic vitality. Again, we represent thousands of kids and families in our community who collectively participate in this area. We feel that we are ready as a unified coalition of youth sports organizations to support a bond measure to help fund a Lake Point Park development and shoreline buffer if fields are included as part of the equation. Thank you very much.
Hi, Elizabeth Mooney, City of Kenmore. One, thank you for Earth Day, and our nonprofit People for Environmentally Responsible Kenmore was happy to be a participant. I want to thank the volunteers in our group that were there. Two, Lake Point is also called something else, which it is right now, which is Kenmore Industrial Park. So I just want to emphasize all the stuff that's there, the gravel that the other big company puts there, and that's Cal Portland, AKA Glacier Northwest. Right now, what's happening, I'm concerned about, which is that Glacier Northwest, which brings in the barges and puts the gravel on what you're calling Lake Point, and I'm calling Kenmore Industrial Park. They want to dredge deeper so that they can bring in bigger barges with more gravel. So I'm just saying, yeah, I'd love to have something great out on Lake Point, AKA Kenmore Industrial Park. But first, with the due diligence, we've got to figure out who put the toxins or the trash there. And right now, luckily, finally, Department of Ecology has a project manager that is working on that site. With the hiring freezes, we didn't even have that all during COVID. So we need to just have community meetings. I support what Brent Smith said about community involvement, Jim Myers, Stacy Valenzuela. We need to figure out what the toxins are out in our environment so that we can take care of public health and safety. We have log boom, and if the toxins that are coming from too much heavy industry and barging without testing, we don't want to hurt the people who are using the beach at log boom and kayaking. So anyway, I look forward to PERC having more lecture series in the city and getting the community out here so we work together and go logically and safely.
Thank you. Danielle Olson, Jeff Chisholm, Corey Holder. Not seeing Ms. Olson. Mr. Chisholm, go ahead.
Jeff Chisholm, Kenmore, evening. Well, you've maxed out taxes, so now we're resorting to levies to fund the stuff that we want, which I'm actually okay with. It's the priorities I have an issue with. There are certain core fundamental governmental functions the city must fulfill. Police, parks, roads, land use. Then you got a zillion other things that people would love to have. Lake Point, housing, climate action, diversity, inclusion, the whole thing. You must fund the core government obligations first. You have more than enough regular tax revenue, you should fund those. This gamesmanship where you protect the feel-good projects, and I'll say it, climate action and DEI, those are protected. You didn't let the financial task force look at those, and you didn't let the taxpayers and their tax organizer look at those. You're protecting those and making public safety an option. What a gamble. Now, the other thing that you're doing when you're maxing out the taxes is you're running out the lowest income people in the city. When you raise the taxes, I'm not leaving because of taxes, but there's people over there in the mobile home park who you will be forcing out by the millions of dollars of taxes that you're throwing at us. The second thing that you're running the risk of is at some point, voters get tax weary and they start voting down the levies. Now, I don't know what the taxpayers are going to do with the levy for public safety or what you're going to do if they vote it down. But after public safety comes Lake Point. Eventually, you're going to want to float a $40 million bond issue for a public works project. I do submit by the time you get through all the rest of these levies, the answer will be no when you get to the public works project.
Thank you. Corey Holder. Corey Holder going once. Twice. Okay. Mayor, that concludes our on-site speakers list. Would you like us to move on to our virtual comments?
Yes.
We do have one person who signed up to speak, as the other one was on site with us. Billy Brandon. Billy Brandon, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I have been listening this whole time. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. This is just a public announcement about a dog safety issue that we've had. I've lived in Kenmore since 2011. We have a gentleman with 2 Rottweilers. One, he continues to walk off leash, and the other has been deemed vicious and needs to have a muzzle. And he was shown to not have his dog on the leash that was ordered to do and not be wearing a muzzle. The reason I wanted to speak is just to get it out there that this man will continue to break the order that is given to him by King County Animal Control. I'm not sure if he has the right fencing. He did not have the right type of muzzle, so that was corrected in the recent hearing. And I'm located just north of the North Shore Summit and to the middle school. He will take his dogs to Forest Glen Park, and since it's Snohomish County, the laws don't apply there. I just want everybody to know that this man he goats people on, he ridicules them. The man that was bitten is a university professor. He does not individually want to be under the man's radar given the mental health issues that this gentleman has. And we will continue to be watchful in our neighborhood and report as best we can. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Mayor Herbig, this concludes our on-site and virtual speakers lists.
Is Corey Sept back in the room? Okay. That concludes public comment. I want to thank everybody for coming out. It's important that we hear from you. We really do appreciate it. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
All right, we got a motion from Councilmember Culver, a second from Councilmember Shrubnik. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda stands approved. Next, we're going to recognize one of my favorite people in Kenmore. We're going to recognize Sarah Saloom Hayashi, outgoing Arts of Kenmore president. So a little bit of background about Sarah, if you're not familiar. Sarah started volunteering for the annual Kenmore Art Show back in 2001 and became a leader of the juried production for many years. She's curated and hung over 35 art shows in the City Hall Gallery right behind that wall there. She has led the annual Arts of Kenmore juried art show for many, many years. She's helped to facilitate the creation of several public art pieces in the city, including the Kenmore Mural Project at St. Vincent de Paul, Art Wrap at Cal Portland, Legends Bench at Rhododendron Park, the Progress Steps at City Hall. She's also worked tirelessly for Arts of Kenmore through grant writing and advocacy, and she is an artist in her own right, having done utility wraps of her own on 73rd and 181st. And I think if you look at some of the fire hydrants around here, you will see her work also. So with that, we are proclaiming May 7th, 2024 to be Sarah Saloom Hayashi Day in the city of Kenmore. Whereas Sarah Saloom Hayashi started volunteering for the annual Kenmore Art Show in 2001 and became a leader in the jury production for many years. And whereas Sarah Saloom Hayashi has curated and hung over 35 art shows for the City Hall Gallery. And whereas Sarah Saloom Hayashi has led the annual Arts of Kenmore juried art show for repeat years. And whereas Sarah Saloom Hayashi has helped to facilitate the creation of several public art pieces, including the Kenmore Mural Project at St. Vincent de Paul, the Art Wrap at Cal Portland, Legends Bench at Rhododendron Park, and the Progress Steps at City Hall. And whereas Sarah Saloom Hayashi has worked tirelessly for the Arts of Kenmore through grant writing and advocacy. And whereas Sarah Saloom Hayashi is an artist herself with a utility wrap of her own work in Kenmore. And whereas Sarah Saloom Hayashi has been an integral part of the long-term success of Arts of Kenmore and is going to be greatly missed. Now, therefore, I, Nigel Herbig, Mayor of the City of Kenmore, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby congratulate and honor Sarah Saloom Hayashi upon her leave and declare May 7th, 2024 as Sarah Saloom Hayashi Day here in Kenmore. Do you want to say a few words, Sarah? I couldn't imagine you saying no to that.
Sarah Saloom Hayashi, and it's been just hilarious of how the name reads up there. It said Swamp Yashi for once. That was a good one.
That was my mumbling. I apologize.
No, you were great. And Miss Sarah, Kenmore resident, actually the very year that we incorporated, bought our house, and it was still a Bothell zip code, 98011. And when we moved in February 15th, it was 98028. So we've had a great ride together, but I want to thank all of you, Don, Rob, Nathan, Melanie, Nigel, Deborah, Valerie, Joe, John, and our community. Thank you very much. I said something to Rob the other day. It takes a rare person to enable somebody else to be rare. I thank you. I thank my mentors here out in the audience. Thank you.
Don't go running away too quickly, Sarah. Sarah, got to do a picture with the council.
Yeah, I just want to add a couple more things. The other day I asked Sarah of all the things she's done in Kenmore, what meant the most to her. And without hesitating, she said it was the Legends Bench project in Rhododendron Park. And I agree that was really the pinnacle of what you did here in Kenmore. And that says a lot because you did a lot of amazing things here and you put in thousands upon thousands of hours in the name of art and community here in Kenmore. And as you know, we have this For the Love of Kenmore program, where we talk about co-creators, but you are what we now call a super co-creator. And so we have a special super co-creator award to give you.
Kenmore will not be the same without you, Sarah. Thank you. And now we would like to give the incoming president of Arts of Kenmore, Judy Elbert, a chance to be introduced.
I'm Judy, and I just want to say like 30 seconds, which is we really stand up if you're on the part of the board of Kenmore, Arts of Kenmore. We, as the Board of Arts of Kenmore, we really appreciate the many hours Sarah has spent with each one of us, teaching us different aspects of what Arts of Kenmore does. And as we look back on what Sarah's brought, we see there's a common theme that Sarah's work in Kenmore brings joy, meaning, and value. And her motto is, let's beautify this. And so that's going to be our motto going forward, is to let's beautify this and bring joy, meaning, and value to Kenmore. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we'd like to do two things. We want to recognize our city clerk, Anastasia Warhol's Master Municipal Clerk certification and issue a proclamation for Professional Municipal Clerks Week. So I will start off with the proclamation. Whereas the office of the Professional Municipal Clerk is a time-honored and vital part of local government existing throughout the world and one of the original public servants. And whereas the office of the Professional Municipal Clerk provides the professional link between the residents, the local governing bodies, and agencies of government at other levels. And whereas professional municipal clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all. And whereas city clerks faithfully support the functions of democracy in supporting the government bodies of the city. And whereas city clerks are essential to Kenmore's core administrative functions for governance, supporting the Kenmore City Council and the city's records management. And whereas it is important that we recognize the accomplishments of the office of the professional municipal clerk. Now therefore, I, Nigel Herbig, Mayor of the City of Kenmore, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the week of May 5th through 11th, 2024 to be Professional Municipal Clerks Week throughout the City of Kenmore. The City Council extends appreciation to our professional municipal clerks, Anastasia Warhol and Michelle King, and to all municipal clerks for their vital services they perform and their exemplary dedication to the communities they represent. And now I'm just going to read a little bit about our chief clerk. So we want to recognize Anastasia Warhol's Master Municipal Clerk certification. Anastasia became a certified clerk in 2015. Certified clerks work towards their master certification by attending the Northwest Clerks Institute, mentoring other clerks, and contributing to the city where they work. Master Municipal Clerk is the highest designation to be issued from the International Institute of Municipal Clerks. Anastasia's achievement furthers the work of an essential professional clerk's office for the City of Kenmore, including supporting all of our Open Public Meetings Act meetings, such as this one. She's joined here by her husband, Matt, and daughters, Leah, Sasha, and Vera Warhol. So congratulations, Anastasia, and we'd love to have a picture with you.
Thank you. And before I disappoint anyone in the audience, my 3 sugar plums, Leah, Sasha, and Vera, left about 3 minutes ago because it's past their bedtime. But they sure tried. They tried to stay up, but I'm delighted to be here with all of you, and thank you.
All right, and with that, we are going to recess into a study session to talk about our financial sustainability plan. So we will move over to the study session table and reconvene from there. All right. So first item of our study session agenda, Financial Sustainability Plan Task Force recommendations presented by Finance and Administration Director Melinda Merrill and FSP Task Force members.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all who have stayed for this part of the meeting. I am so happy to introduce the group that has created the FSP Task Force. It's been such a pleasure of mine to get to work with these fabulous volunteers, and I would like to go through everyone who is on the committee. So we have Mike Vanderlyn, and if you could kind of, flag your hand, that's great. Alanafe Matenda, he is not here tonight. Mary Sullivan is not here tonight. Tiff Stoner is in the audience. Jeff Pooley is next to me. Edward LaSalle is next to me, and Katrina Rose at the end, and then Holly Colling. So just a fantastic group of people. Oh, you know what? Because I can't see you, you're right. Oh, Vincent King, my bad. Couldn't see you, sorry. These amazing volunteers have worked tirelessly for the past 4 months, since early January, and have been meeting beyond the hours we suggested to meet every time, and just listening to amazing input from all the residents, from all the people here, all the staff here at the city, and having conversations amongst themselves. And it's just been an amazing thing to be a part of. So amazing thing in my career I've never gotten to do. So I'm just so impressed. And this is not about me though, this is about the work that they've done. And so I'm gonna pass it over to Edward.
Thanks, Melinda. Thank you very much for having us. We know that our recommendations are going to Melinda and to the city manager, but when we had the opportunity of talking here today, we were very, very touched and wanted to probably spend as much time as we can on explaining the intent as much as our recommendations, so we can provide kind of color commentary on why we want to have, why we think these recommendations not only help to address the issue, but are or if not the best way we could think of on how to address this issue. And this allows me to skip the agenda slide. But so the group that Melinda mentioned, we all applied, we all had conversations with Melinda and Rob. And when we started having the conversation, essentially why we were here was to get to a point where we could address the city's budget imbalance, which is going to extend to 2.6 million per year in 2030. And essentially, that's what we were here to solve. So our task force was really more structural than it was a one-time off issue. And we really focused on that, making sure that those lines didn't cross, or at least crossed in the right direction. Because of that, of course, we couldn't do it on our own. We had numerous, I could have put 10 plus in-person meetings with City Hall, as well as among ourselves, but also had a really, really interesting and contributive and proactive town hall meeting, as well as had participation through the Balancing Act and Speak Up Kenmore slide. I didn't have to do a process slide, but I think it's really important, just without going into the detail, that obviously before we could recommend, we had to learn. And we spent a lot of the upfront sessions working with city staff and city staff leadership, really trying to learn better about city budgeting, but also about the specifics of Kenmore and the different departments to make sure that our recommendations were relevant to the needs that we understood for Kenmore. Essentially, why we're here is this slide, and this sums up essentially what the issue is. Because of caps on property taxes and on utility taxes, as well as the high inflation, who unfortunately as citizens we've been experiencing personally in our lives as well, there is a disconnect between the projections that were done between the expenses and the revenues. So all the red is not something that is going to work for Kenmore, and so this is what we're trying to address. There are other issues, and the one I think we're going to spend most time on is the police issue specifically. But ultimately, that's what we were trying to address. Now, thankfully, we didn't have to address all the city budget in one go because most of the funds are self-funded. And so we really focused on the general fund and the street fund, which was still 35 million, but is something that was our remit. And so our recommendations are really going to be focusing on the general fund and the street fund. Won't focus on transport benefits, ARPA, strategic reserve, park impact fee, et cetera, because those aren't tied to the systemic issue of revenues being impacted more than expenses, or the opposite. The first elements, where I said we want to learn about the city finances, we wanted to understand what were the main issues, both in terms, and what were the main ticket items, both in terms of revenues and in terms of expenditures. And the top three are, unsurprising from a revenue perspective, property taxes, though we'll get into that after a bit more in detail, sales taxes and utility taxes, which count for roughly 75% of all taxes, the other revenues only counting for the remaining 23. And from an expenditure perspective, far ahead of all the others, public safety and the police is our main expenditure, followed by public works, facilities, and the city manager's office. The rest accounting for a bit less than a half of the total budget, again, for the general fund and the street fund combined. So those were from the start top of mind on if we can try and maximize our impact, this is where we wanted to look at, both in terms of revenues and expenditures. And we wanted to look at equally both revenues and expenditures because it needed to be balanced. The first element we wanted to look at is revenues. Now, Washington State, as you know, does not have a revenue tax. And so what we wanted to focus on was understanding the property taxes. And unfortunately, as residents, we know that property taxes have been increasing. What we wanted to understand also is how much was the city getting from these property taxes? And we were kind of dismayed to realize that although in absolute value, that number was slightly eking up, the amount that the city gets from property taxes proportionally is decreasing year after year. Which meant that despite us paying in property taxes a non-negligible fee, to stay very, very polite, the amount of that is allocated to what the city can do is unfortunately decreasing, not increasing. When we know that the inflation, however, hasn't changed, that essentially is the crux of the issue. The other element that we looked at from a revenue perspective was to try and understand, well, if not property taxes, what are the other tax opportunities? And we covered before that utility taxes was the second one. There are legal caps on taxes that aren't property tax as well. And therefore, there is no ability for the city to increase those taxes beyond a certain limit, except if you decide to go in front of the voters. The 6 items we wanted to list are property taxes, natural gas, electric, telecom, cable, and car tabs. Of those 6, 3 are already capped. Property tax is capped at 1% increase, and we are at a 1% yearly increase. Natural gas is not allowed to be taxed more than 6% and is already at 6%. And telecom, same situation, is at 6%. The other 3, where there is potential leeway, would be electric, but that would go potentially against the council's preference to encourage electric over other utilities. Cable is vaguer. It should be not unduly discriminatory, but it's already at 6% aligned with natural gas and telecom. And car tabs is at $40. There isn't necessarily a cap, but there is a time cap where if you wanted to move it to $50, you would have to wait 24 months or at least February 2025 to do the increases. So those were kind of the 2 considerations we want to share with you of what can be done with revenues has at its limits outside of political considerations, but which is partially part of the issue, right, of not being able to increase revenues in line with expenditures due to inflation because of those legal limits. The other element that we wanted to look at is focusing on expenditures. Now, the slide I'm just sharing is the perspective we wanted to have on understanding the difference between core, basic, and enhanced services. I know that earlier in the public comment session, we had some people speak up in terms of what the city must do. What the city must do covers more than 50% of what the city already is doing. Really basic of road maintenance, police, city governance, courts, and emergency management. Basic services are also what we expect the city to do and covers an extra 36% of that of park maintenance, street maintenance, employee training, front desk reception, IT support, all of those elements. And it's only kind of the peel of the orange that remains with the enhanced services where recreational programs, events, human services, state and federal lobbying, the hangar, all of those things are what kind of makes Kenmore Kenmore, but is also what potentially could be the most modifiable. We're not saying that the core services cannot be modified, just that the level of modification that you could bring without deteriorating the service so much that it would not be functional is much more limited than enhanced services. Unfortunately, the enhanced services only are less than 10% of that total budget, and therefore there's less areas to do. The other element that we did look at, despite what some people might think, is headcount. We wanted to obviously understand what is the headcount situation for the city staff of Kenmore, and wanted to understand if there was an ability to be more lean, be more cost effective in the allocation of resources. One thing, while we didn't do a one-by-one review, one thing we did find interesting, wanted to share with you, is that it's our understanding that actually Kenmore is one of the leanest organizations in our neighborhood. If we take the number of city staff employees per 1,000 capita, the only city that beats us in terms of smaller staff is Mill Creek, and we actually would love to know more. And this is a conversation we've had with Melinda, with Rob, of understanding how is Mill Creek so bloody lean. But outside of Mill Creek, we are the leanest city in all of the area. Bothell is bigger than us. Lake Forest Park is comparable, but still slightly bigger. Mercer Island is way bigger. Mount Lake Terrace is bigger. Shoreline is bigger. Woodinville is bigger. And even compared to the average, we are roughly one city staff per 1,000 employee, 1,000 resident more than any other in the area. Not saying that there cannot be improvements, but compared to our peers, it would not appear that we are particularly bloated, which was also something we want to focus on. And finally, the two elements, and I'll try and be mindful of time, apologies for that, is focusing on police. Because the police issue, if it is an issue, is at least the cause of why we're here today from the FSP meeting that happened in 2020. We are a contract city from a police perspective, and there are regular conversations on can the police be internalized outside of being contracted by King County Sheriff. The limitation is not going to be in the police force. The limitation is going to be, okay, well, if we are internalizing it, everything that you see to the right needs to be extra headcount. Admin, training, finance, HR, IT, ethics, procurement, insurance, all of those things, not necessarily the headcount. So could it be done? Probably. However, it is going to most likely be challenging in a way that we as residents would not see. Now, I said those were the police is the reason why we had the highest increase and why we're here today. And it is for three reasons. Police costs, police insurance costs have gone up significantly. It's very, very hard to retain police officers, and therefore there has been across the board, not just for us, salary and retention increases to make sure that we had the right police force stay to serve Kenmore the way it deserves to be served. And finally, the body cam program purchases and running is really the third element of this. And so as you can see, the line that goes up and then kinds of averages out is a state mandated unavoidable cost where we cannot not pay for it, and is impacting the city finance budget significantly on the general and street fund. So with that said, what we wanted to do and understand was, it is our understanding that this is a primarily revenue-driven issues for the reasons we mentioned before. We are dealing with an existing lean city staff structure. Again, not saying that cannot be done further, but it is an existing lean starting situation. We have the public safety, which is a unique issue which we want to address uniquely. We also want to recognize, and we've heard it also tonight during the public comment section, that residents have a finite tax-bearing capacity, which we want to be mindful of, not only selfishly as taxpayers ourselves, but as just residents part of this task force. And the two final elements, which I think are really important in the conversations we've had, were that we want to plan for, our recommendations, because they are only recommendations, but we want our recommendations to be able to allow you to plan for the future. If we were just to address the first slide and the red in the first slides, then you would effectively be tied to doing what you're doing today until 2030, not be able to do anything else. We wanted also to give you the ability to strategically invest in Kenmore based on what you felt was important. And finally, be it on Speak Up Kenmore or during the town hall, or us as residents when we talked with other fellow residents, we understand that there's strong support for what the city offers and the appeal of the orange that we mentioned. And while it is a potential area for cost reduction, it is also something that residents care about deeply. And we wanted to be mindful of not slashing just because it was easier and would allow us to go home earlier than the conversations we've had. Now, in terms of knowing what is best for Kenmore, it's really a two-pronged approach. One, obviously, we relied heavily on the city staff, helping us understand not only what were the specifics of city staff. I personally am not a city finance person or a public finance person, but we also relied on the departmental suggestions on what can we do better for parks and recreation, what can we do better for strategic planning, what can we do better for city manager's office. But we wanted to be, as much as we could, representatives of Kenmore residents, and that's why we also very, very heavily relied on the strategic suggestions, which we had at the town hall, and read in detail through not only the budgets that were submitted, but also through the suggestions that we received in Speak Up Kenmore through the Balancing Act. And hopefully what we would like to share with you now is going to be the recommendations that hopefully combine those four different elements. In terms of what we suggest, and I'll skip maybe the next slide, but we factored in city departments and resident guidance ideas. We wanted this to be right timed, as in we wanted it to be as if it were revenue increases as far out in the future as possible while still maintaining a balanced budget. And we wanted it to be prioritized and tiered based on the likelihood of success according to DEI and fiscally responsible principles, and obviously aligned to your own strategic priorities. The 2024 version, though, I know you reviewed your priorities recently, but the ones we followed were the ones that were public at the time. The guiding principles I'll just skip because there's a lot. It's available on the city website in the Speak Up Kenmore, but essentially we wanted it to be balanced. We wanted it to not unduly burden our poorer residents, but there's a more detailed version of it available on the website. Now, all of that was the context, and the part that we want to cover now is what are our recommendations. Our recommendations are essentially 5 things. Mentioned that the police force is an issue, and we wanted, for the specific issue of the police force, we wanted a specific response. We also want to ensure further sustainability for our parks, which in Kenmore are definitely a feature which need to be protected. We wanted to make sure that the city was being efficient and that there were cost reductions where we felt there could be some. strategically expand the city capabilities, and finally ensure the fairness of the tax burden. Item 1, public safety. So public safety is our biggest issue for the city finance. And so we felt it fair to address that through a specific response, which is a two-pronged response. One, a targeted levy lid lift to fund public safety, where it would be 16 cents per $1,000 of assessed value, as well as securing the public safety sales tax before King County takes it. So King County hasn't exercised their maximum sales tax yet. And if they do, then the city is not allowed to leverage that. So it felt like a shame to have our sales tax money go to King County rather than us. And so our recommendation would be to leverage that as quickly as possible. So because it will eventually get excised over time, might as well go to our city rather than King County more generally. The other element would be to leverage the traffic cameras. And our recommendation is to add 4 cameras around our schools, as well as to increase the first tier ticket cost to $136. It's currently at $100 today. And the average cost of speeding cameras today is at $136 in our region. So we're not increasing it as much as we're just aligning it to the cost of the area. We'll go into the timing afterwards. Again, our intent is to maximize it over time so that the burden is as limited on residents as possible. And if you're interested, we'd love to go into the detail more in depth in the Excel version of this, which I will hand over to Jeff afterwards. The second element is in ensuring sustainability for our parks. Essentially, we talked about, and there was already conversations about the Metropolitan Park District levy, which would be the bulk of our recommendation. The other one would be implementing picnic shelter rental fees. The picnic shelters exist. We want people to be able to contribute to city finances if need be. If they want to reserve it, we are recommending that people should be paying for it rather than just benefiting for free. The third element that you can see here is we wanted to acknowledge that with the Lake Point development, if, and this is, I could not put an if in the font size big enough, but if the city of Kenmore received a grant to fund, to purchase the strip around the Lake Point area, then only then would we also expect you to pay for additional survey costs for the viability of the broader Lake Point project. And that $500K that you can see there would only impact if you have the grant, which of course, we hope you do, but it's not an automatic $500K. The third element is we talked a lot so far about revenues. We wanted also to address expenditures. And so the 4 recommendations we have here are, first of all, some funds are self-funded, as we mentioned, and the issue is with the general fund and the street fund. Our recommendation, when possible, is to move some key staff headcount over to those funds. And having talked with Rob and Melinda, we believe that this would not negatively impact the capability of those people who therefore would have to work on specifically capital projects or the civil engineer and transportation specifically. And they would still be able to support the city in the way the city needs. We also kind of have an ask of the city of committing to an extra $100,000 a year of further improved operational efficiency. Grab here, grab there, make sure that that $100,000 is contributing to the general city finances. Temporary staffing reduction is also something that we are recommending. And finally, through converting all city streetlights to LEDs, there is the possibility of saving $69,000 a year due to electric efficiency costs. So why wouldn't we? The final elements are, first, we mentioned that we didn't want to just leave you with a recommendation where you would be tied to the current situation. So In the wiggle room that we're hoping this recommendation would create, there are two elements that I think that we feel are important. Is one, we've talked a lot about economic development, and economic development in our downtown, we feel is something that needs to be strategically thought out. And the only way to strategically think it out is to have someone to strategically think it out, and therefore have the capability focusing on this strategic and economic development to provide direction and vision to our downtown and to broader areas, and also supporting our less favored residents, having a human services caseworker. It doesn't have to be a headcount that would be a Kenmore headcount. It could be a contracting with another organization, but giving the support that those people need to gain access to the programs and understand the administrative burden for those people.
I just add one thing. Yeah, it's just a little bit of extra context on the strategic and economic development. That came pretty late in the process. We talked a lot about economic development as a task force. I served on the task force 4 years ago. I'm here again. I'm happy to come back in 4 years, but you know, we want the council, and we think that there's a lot of indication from our community that we want more long-term development that can aid in our sustainability. And so whether it's a specific headcount or whether you engage a consultant to do things, this is just kind of a money where your mouth is figure to say that we think that there is some long-term strategic planning that the city could benefit from, some expertise that the city could benefit from, partnering, you know, who are we talking to? When we had a chance to talk with some of the staff, we asked some of these questions, and they're like, I don't have time to do that. I'm busy just getting things approved, or I'm just trying to get those essential services done. We don't really have time for that strategic thinking. So there's room here on what the specifics are, but I just wanted to add that context.
Yeah, we might be able to have find grants for this kind of stuff. We were also noting that in our meetings that there's a possibility of finding grants to cover this. Also, it wouldn't have to come out of our general fund.
Thanks, Bob. The final element, we're getting to the end. Final element is we recognize that because this is a primarily revenue-driven issue, we are offering primarily revenue-driven solutions. But we want to be mindful of the tax burden that those solutions offer cause to our residents. And so because of that, also part of this wiggle room is setting up a utility tax rebate program to ensure the affordability of taxes overall for all Kenmore residents, and also eliminating the admissions tax because the number of businesses impacted is very limited, and the amount captured is limited as well. And we wanted to recognize that we not only want to be resident focused, but we also want to be business friendly in Kenmore. Overall, this is one way of looking at it, of what these would provide, but a better way would be to do it over time. And so our recommendations are here. As you can see, we've tried to stack the revenues as late as possible to allow for the levy lid lifts, et cetera, to be structured as late as possible to minimize the tax burden for Kenmore residents. But on top of that, the three elements we want to factor in the full recommendations that we'll be providing, that we have actually provided to Melinda and Rob, are an element of prioritization. Every one of these recommendations was voted on by the task force and given an individual score. So if the city manager's office, and if you want to look into which ones ranked first and which ones ranked lowest and why, that is available as well. Timing is an important thing. There is a very cool Excel model that was built, which will allow you to also see what is the impact of the different taxes or the different cost-cutting measures depending on when they get applied. And the final element is approval modalities. Some of these recommendations are councilmanic. Some of these require you to go in front of the voters. And so again, there's the ability for you to fine tune based on those three elements, depending on your personal preferences. And just again, in a question of context, understand why our recommendations are what they are. So with that said, hopefully our recommendations transform what you see to the left to what you see to the right, which not only allow the lines to uncross between revenues and expenditures, but also provide you, council, with fund reserves to strategically invest in Kenmore for the years to come. With that, on behalf of the FSP Task Force, a huge thanks to Rob, Melinda, and Carla, who I don't see today, who have been with us all the time. The department heads who've really provided meaningful input, obviously you for inviting us tonight, your time and the questions we're looking forward to. And especially to the residents who are here tonight to listen to this, who also gave their opinion during the town hall and during the on Speak Up Kenmore, without who we wouldn't have any of this. So thank you.
Questions? Councilor Lucis.
Going back to the Economic Development Manager and Human Services Caseworker, are those expected or anticipated to be full-time workers, or would those be outside contracted help?
So as I said about the economic development, we're not sure what the most effective use of that would be. So that could, I think that having a full-time staff person, there's advantages to that because you have someone who's invested in the long term. If you get a consultant, they may give you a great recommendation, but they won't be here in 5 years. So they don't know if they're not going to be able to continue to steer and adapt to things. So that's some kind of the considerations. As far as the human services, and I think the Navigator program, there was some discussion around, there's lots of great partners and programs that we could engage with. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be a headcount. We can fund those programs and give them a space at City Hall and accomplish the same thing, if not better, because they have that. We already have those partnerships established.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Marshall.
Yeah, could you go into a little bit more about the temporary staff reduction? And I apologize if I didn't find it all. How long that was proposed to last, what departments or where, or what process it was going to be to arrive at that? And then the second question is, how do we know that King County, and I assume we know for sure that King County is going to take that 0.1%?
Go ahead.
Make sure your
King
mic is
County-
turned on.
What? Yeah.
Okay,
it's-
sorry.
King County can take the 0.3% sales tax. So as a task force, we were assuming that that they were eventually going to do it. If they do that, they'll have to split that where we get 40 and they get 60%. If we can get in there before them, then we get to keep that whole 0.1 or point in the recommendation was the 0.1%, that we'll get to keep that whole amount. What was your first question?
I think just to jump into this, I think it's a bit of a catch-22 situation on when to get there, because obviously if you ask them when they're going to do it, you know what, we're going to do it right now. And so it's up to you. I think we would defer to you on when you think best to, when to action this best between the latest possible to limit sales taxes, but at the same time early enough so that you get to go in before King County. The issue being, as soon as you start mentioning it, they probably will say, you know what, I forgot that. And so you would have to probably decide going in without warning anybody.
This is our understanding as we were doing these learning sessions. So, we would defer to your staff and experts on the legality and the technicalities of that. But that was one of the reasons why we put it forward, is that was our understanding. As far as the temporary employee question that you had, just to be clear, we have the city of Kenmore, our understanding is that there are a few employees that are employed under using ARPA funds, and they have temporary contracts that are due to expire. And the idea is that we would allow those contracts to expire and no longer employ them because we don't want to take on that cost in the general fund. If the city has some other way to fund them, either with additional grant funds, or there was also some discussion about instituting a lodging tax, or which the lodging tax is already in place. We can just decide to claim that for Kenmore in a similar vein. But we would, by taking that tax, we would have certain obligations to the law. We only have one, it's the lodge. And so we would have certain obligations to fulfill, and we could direct some of those staff to work on that. And so it would still be a savings to the general fund, but it wouldn't, but you would be paying for it with different dollars.
Councilmember Schiffman.
This is great. Again, thank you. And just to reiterate, I think what we're all, we all really appreciate your hard work on this. And, particularly the important piece, of course, is, how do we not let the lines cross as soon as they would have? And I appreciate all the work on that. And one of my questions was about the sales tax, so that's super helpful. And I think the revenue options will be very helpful as we move into the budget process in the fall. And similarly, I think the suggestions for ads, which kind of go beyond are the lines going to cross, would need, for me at least, would need to compete with all the other issues and expenses, costs that we're looking at in the budget process, which happens later in the year. So while I appreciate that, there's many other things that will be competing against those, at least for me. So let's see. So a couple of questions. Do you have any insights into the other, I'm using air quotes here, I know people can't see, other revenues, which were 23% of the revenues, and other expenses, which were 44%? I mean, those are huge proportions of revenue and expense. What are we talking about there? What are those kinds of things?
Sure.
Aha.
Yeah. So this was the analysis. It's an itty bitty for me, but hopefully it's bigger a bit for you. Essentially, so public safety is our big one, public works, followed by city manager's office. The rest in decreasing order are development services, finance and administration, community department, public works, engineering, non-departmental transfers, city clerk, legal, HR.
So this analysis is just the other?
So yes, in the initial slide.
No, it's not. So public safety is
yeah, that's what
2%.
Yeah.
So the other is everything below, I think we said everything below city manager's office, right?
Yeah, top three.
Yeah, so starting with developmental services, community development, public works, those are all included in the other because they weren't big enough to justify one line on that slide.
Okay, thank you.
So,
That's super helpful.
And just some additional context, we had, I can't remember how many, 11 different department heads come and talk to us, and we had a chance to lob questions at them and say, can you do this more efficiently? Could you deal with it less staff or those kinds of things? And I mean, there's a certain amount of trust that when they say, actually, my staff is at 100%, maybe 110%, if I'm being honest, there's a certain amount of trust that we're giving them that they're doing that accurately and representing that in good faith. But when we questioned and really tried to push, like, where could you cut and still fulfill the city's obligations to get permits approved on time, get, make sure that we're maintaining our streets and all those kinds of things. It was really, there really weren't very many big line items to cut. Frustratingly so for everybody involved.
No, and understood. And I think, every 2 years we go through this exercise, right? Not the FSP exercise, but the exercise of, what are the revenues and, can we cut expenditures? Pretty much every level of government goes through that exercise. So we'll be doing that later in the year.
So I have a couple questions about the B&O. I know it wasn't prioritized. I am curious. We have a B&O right now. It targets heavy industrial only. So we are already targeting certain businesses. That was a strategic decision somewhere in the past, before I was on council for sure. And so, I mean, obviously every business is different, but I mean, do we have a sense of, poor, 100,000 gross, or I don't know if it's on net income. I don't know how B&Os are structured. I mean, do we have a sense of what the impact would be on a business of a certain gross income?
We didn't there wasn't a lot of appetite among the task force members to really like look into this as a source of revenue, so we didn't get into those details.
Okay,
But
that's okay.
can defer to-
I would certainly be interested, since most of our neighboring cities do have something on the B&O side, and we don't, and we're trying to be equitable, not put the burden completely on homeowners. And of course, nobody likes sales taxes. They're very regressive as well. So just trying to, spread the issue.
We did have some discussions around, so the B&O tax being on the heavy industry, but the city does actually then spend money with checking air quality and doing so those businesses are kind of costing the city also.
Oh,
a
yeah,
little bit
for
more than
sure.
some of the others.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that we had discussed.
Right.
Looks like the city manager might have a comment.
Oh, okay. Mhm.
Yeah, if you want us to come back and do more research on it,
Yeah.
we can.
Yeah.
So we did look at Shoreline and Lake Forest Park, those two cities, those two neighboring cities have B&O tax. And based on what they're collecting, we did a rough estimate on what we think Kenmore would collect, and we think it'd be in the neighborhood of about $400,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing we need to look into further is the administration of it. For example, we just have the two businesses now, and we have city staff in the finance department that actually send them an invoice for the revenue. And so we need to know and multiply that times however many businesses and the administrative costs that we would probably have to take off of that. So there's a lot of research that needs to be done. It ranges from 0% all the way to 0.2%. Is that right? Yeah, 0.2% is as high as you can go, and it's based on gross revenue.
0.2% of gross revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's super helpful.
Yeah, and
Okay.
and you
So
can
extremely low. Okay.
and you can tax businesses based on sector. For example, you can,
Which we do now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so you could do
Okay.
retail sector at 0.1 and
Right.
services sector at 0.2.
Got it.
And that's what
Okay.
Shoreline does. They have variability.
And you can
depending
also
on
have,
sector.
we saw, I think, Councilmember Culver sent us some information as well. And I think there can also be a floor below which, a gross income floor below which you don't levy it at all, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Small business, in
Yeah,
other words.
I think Shoreline has a $5,000.
And would the two businesses that are targeted by the potential admissions tax, I mean, they would be covered by a B&O tax, right? I mean, they would be part of the pool if we had a regular B&O.
Yeah, if you chose to include that sector, yeah.
Okay, and on that admissions tax, it doesn't generate that much, which implies to me that it's a pretty low burden is the word that comes to mind, but I guess I'll just use that word, burden on the businesses. Do we have a sense proportionally what would be the bowling alley? There's only two businesses, bowling alley versus the golf course of that amount? No, okay. I would be interested in both of those. And the last question, let's see, maybe I already got to it. It is a clarification that I was a little confused on the dates. versus the last agenda item where we were talking about a 2024 potential measure. And so just confirming that the dates on the FSP are the dates that the revenue would actually start coming in, which may be obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me because we were talking about ballot measures that would happen significantly before those dates. So those are two different kinds of dates.
Yeah, so on the dates, one of the things that we talked about was the city has a relatively healthy reserve right now. The target is 20% and we're double or even close to 2.5 or 3 times what the target reserve is. Now we're going to eat away at that as the deficit continues to grow, but we don't necessarily need to throw everything, all of these recommendations right away. But it would be helpful if we are going to do a ballot measure to know whether that ballot measure is going to pass or not. And then also with public safety, considering that those increases were recent and some of these things are top of mind, we thought that it might be more strategic to put those on the ballot now when those increases just happened. But the way that we placed the dates in the model is you can put these as late as in effect as late as 2028 and still reach your goal. And so I think there's some wiggle room in the banked capacity that you're planning to use over the next biennium. You can bank additional capacity. So for example, if you were to put the public safety ballot measure on the ballot this year and add that 16 cents, you could bank that 1% capacity plus the capacity that you were planning to use over the next 4 years, and then start using that banked capacity to sort of, basically we're just trying to get that slope. Instead of trying to step up and then have it be flat, we're trying to adjust the slope to be in line with expenditures so that we're not just building a huge reserve and acting like a bank for the citizens of Kenmore.
Yeah, and the timing was different, like with the levy, we could put it on the ballot in November and then be collecting the money like next year. Whereas with the MPD, we would put it on the ballot, then you create your MPD, and then you would get your levy after that. So there were some different timelines that were all kind of meshing together there.
To continue that thought, so you had the revenue from the Metropolitan Park District starting in 2026, which means you'd have to go to the voters this year in 2024 to see the money in 2026, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, so, and that is where our task force just doesn't have nearly the experience or expertise on knowing what is going to be the most advantageous. We thought that doing some of those ballot measures earlier and knowing if they're going to pass or fail would be advantageous as far as like just planning over time. But, the appetite and things like that, we got our comments from the town hall and we had our own thoughts and opinions, but we really kind of floundered a little bit when we started talking about strategy. And so we really tried to put together a plan that helped inform you about what timing is necessary. But as far as, when we think a ballot measure is going to pass, I don't know how much we can really say.
Can I clarify something? Earlier, we were talking about the temporary staffing reduction. If I can clarify that the 2 ARPA employees are currently not in the forecast, and it's assumed in these numbers that their positions do expire at the end of this year. What happened though is there was another employee that was helping us temporarily, whose position was also supposed to expire by the end of this year. And that position was inadvertently included in the forecast. And so the task force is recommending that position's term also end at the end of this year. And so that's where that $100,000 savings came from.
Councilmember Sassen.
Thank you. May I have the previous slide back? Not this one. The one that was tiny on your screen. It had big bars of yellow.
All the boxes. All the boxes of
The breakdown.
Sorry.
That one.
Yeah.
It's going to take me a few minutes to articulate this, so please forgive me. Or maybe just, I beg a little patience. I am inspired by the multiple pronged approach that you took and your thoroughness. And I feel convinced by the categories that are in our control. I feel anxious about the categories that are not in our control, which are the largest categories on the screen. So I just want to call that out for myself and for all of us in this room, that we have no guarantee that public safety will not continue to be exponentially expensive. We can hope that this increase is a one-off, but we have no guarantee of that. And I need to say that out loud. I do think that as a contract city, working through the county rather than hiring ourselves is absolutely the way to go. I feel very convinced by that from everything I've heard since I became a council member. I think that that works in terms of recruiting quality people and training them and retaining them. I feel convinced by the social justice aspects of RACER and the public court. And I feel committed to the transparency of the body cams, and I'm grateful for that. I feel irritated that it's a national requirement without national funding. And I also feel like I want to say, based on our own police chief's report, we have a relatively safe community, and this is what it costs. So that is really the one thing that's out of our control that gives me worry. Everything that is in our control, I feel encouraged by, but that bit. And then the other thing that's out of our control, honestly, is inflation. We have no control really over how that's going to go. So that's the second wild card in the hand that we're playing. And really the third has to do with our Washington State regressive tax system and the 1% property tax. Again, those things are out of our control. I don't have any answers. I would hope that if opportunities arise, say, we know that we have a change of hands coming in Olympia with our insurance commissioner. Kreidler's not seeking re-election. We have some possibility of a new insurance commissioner. If there were an insurance commissioner indicating that they would be interested in tort reform to reduce liability for liability insurance for public safety, I would hope that Kenmore would support that kind of effort. Really, that's all I have to say. I'm anxious about the things out of our control, but I feel positively about the things in our control. So thank you.
Yeah. Actually, as a task force, we had a lot of discussion around the contract city. So at any time, if King County Sheriff's Office is giving more big raises, definitely the city can embark in studying, is it better to continue? Most likely, I would think it would be, but just to give you that feeling of, are those costs really justified? And one thing that was discussed early on, but was going to take longer to evaluate than what we really had time to do is the city would be evaluating their insurance provider. I guess there's two options, or they could be self-insured. So there was some ongoing, based on our discussion, there was going to be some ongoing work by Melinda and her department to look at that.
I'll just jump in and agree that we don't know if police costs are going to go in. And I think we can thank Kenmore residents for being such a safe community, because although the cost that we have to pay, and we learned this as part of the download that we received, is, although the cost is definitely significant and by far the highest cost center we have, it is also prorated to based on the reliance of specific police services that the city of Kenmore uses. If we were to rely more heavily on SWAT or other specialized entities, then our bill from King County Sheriff would be significantly higher. I think as high as the bill is, it is, I think we can take solace in the fact that we are not paying more because Kenmore is thankfully a relatively safe city.
Yeah, and we're actually able to maintain that safe city with actually a smaller per capita police force than actually a lot of our surrounding neighbors.
Deputy Mayor.
First, I want to thank the task force, all 9 of you, for the time and care that you put into this. I want to share that this may be the best presentation of finance that I've ever seen. 24 years at the port and 4 years here on the council, and I'm in the accounting and financial reporting department. So I just want to say your organization of this information, not only for our use, but for the public understanding of the care and consideration that you went into with what you're proposing is genuinely appreciated. Anyway, I do like an organized presentation that I can follow. And each of you are speaking so clearly and understandably about what can be hard to understand things. So thank you. Really, genuinely thank you. And I appreciate the measured approach to how we can approach increasing revenues if we have to. I know that that's not something that our community is excited about. And I know that we as a council want to limit that as much as possible. And so I do have a question that's fairly specific, but I have a feeling that is for council to discuss, and it's related to the MPD. I did actually like what we learned about at the retreat, which was MPD first and then public safety second, was how it was presented to us then. And I thought that was a very mindful approach. My question is, with an MPD, there is a base entry, like the 5 cents that you're proposing. Did you have a cap that you were recommending? Because we do, if we were to go to the people, have to present a cap.
Yeah, I would say that there was a lot of debate among task force members. There were some members that were a really big fan of the MPD and really wanted to go a lot higher than the 5 cents and have that be sort of our primary funding source for filling this gap. Because parks is such a clear, it's a priority among our residents. It is one of our greatest assets in Kenmore. And so to answer your question, unfortunately, no, we didn't really have a consensus. The MPD ended up being right above the threshold at that 5 cents. And it was, I think the general consensus among the task force that we could all kind of rally around was, we think that this is the direction that Kenmore should go, but with the uncertainty around Lake Point and the kinds of funding that we may want to use an MPD to drive for Lake Point, we weren't sure that establishing a heavy MPD at this time made a lot of sense. When there was such a close tie to the public safety funding, we thought that was more of a direct solution for the problem we were specifically trying to solve. Whereas the MPD, it seemed like there was more opportunity in the future with the direction of Lake Point. But that's just kind of, I'm trying to like explain a lot of that dynamic back and forth and coalesce it into something that is an answer. But again, there is a lot of discussion and back and forth among task force members.
Right.
If anybody wants to jump in, please.
Yeah.
As part of that discussion,
Oh, excuse me, we do have a virtual audience, and if you're recognized, I think by the presiding officer, we need to get you a microphone. So,
I usually don't have a question about my voice carrying, but what I wanted to say here, and just point out here, is one of the ways I think to take a look at think about the Metropolitan Park District is it's a tool. It's a tool for now, it's a tool for the future. If we can get this in now and use it as a primary source to start defraying some of the costs of our existing parks, that's useful. And it's a way to preserve that funding into the future, particularly as we get into more contentious budget years. You've got a dedicated source. But then also, the Metropolitan Park District gives us the opportunity in the future to either increase levy up to beyond what we're looking right now. It's a minimal amount. But also, there's a funding source here for bonding. And as I think you've already been made aware of, that's the opportunity to be able to issue a bond and have a funding source to cover that bond if we did have the opportunity to acquire a part of Lakefront. So really, I'd encourage you to think of it that way, as really it's a tool for the future. What we choose to do it, that may or may not come, but it'll be there for whatever opportunities we have in the future.
Because if you'll notice in that, in the spreadsheet, it didn't rate as high. There wasn't as much consensus around it, but with that timing we were talking about, because the timing from when you go to the voters to when you actually are collecting the money is a lot longer, it ended up being that you would go for that one first before the public safety levy.
Thank you. I think each of you have filled in the gaps of where my questions were trying to lead. Essentially, the MPD is to set up a framework for the future to manage our parks. Doing it this year gets the ball rolling so that we're able to make decisions down the line. I really appreciate that. And I know that right now our timing for some things, there's a lot in flux on some of the biggest issues facing our city. So again, I do want to thank each of you for your time and the care that you put into this presentation. And thank you.
City Manager?
It's all right. I'd like to talk process, like where do we go from here?
I don't think we're quite through questions yet, so.
Okay.
We'll circle back to that. Had a couple of questions. First off, thank you for all the work. This was an exceptional presentation and the report was very comprehensive. So thank you very much. I know that a lot of work and hours and blood, sweat and tears went into this. So thank you sincerely. Couple of questions. One, on the head count figure, were we comparing apples to apples looking at those cities? Were those also contract cities with kind of similar portfolios?
Right. If you notice on that slide, we took out police, fire, and who else?
We did our best.
Okay, no, that's fair. That's
Obviously,
fair.
you're gonna have,
Yeah.
like we contract some things, we have some things in-house. Every city, even contract cities, it's on a spectrum.
Yeah.
We did our best, but yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure we weren't, like when we were comparing Bothell, we weren't comparing like, their fire.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
the
The
Police
big
and
ones
fire
we
removed,
adjusted
yeah.
for.
And the assessment was done with the best knowledge, the least biased knowledge that we had access to, which is, as you can see in the footnote, it's based on the Washington State Office of Financial Management, rather than us going through the agenda of contact people in each city website. So to the best of our knowledge, yes, we are comparing apples to apples.
Okay, fantastic. And then just a couple of comments. One, I don't, I've seen kind of the safety gains that we're getting from the school zone cameras. And I don't see any reason to delay implementing those. I could, we would need to do, of course, a proper study of figuring out where we wanted to put those and have that conversation with the public. But I could see us moving forward with those much faster than how it's laid out in here. Frankly, just for the safety improvements, it's worth it, but from the revenue standpoint also. But we're just seeing massive reductions of speeding in our school zones, which I think is just a really great thing for us to have as a city. Two, I think, and I don't know if I'm speaking for the whole council, I think I might be, but nobody wants to raise taxes. It's not what anybody signs up for when they run for city council and when they're trying to balance the city's budget. And I think, you know, for a lot of folks out there in the public, it's really easy to say, don't raise taxes. And I get that. Nobody wants to see their property tax go up. I think something that we need to recognize is that we see when we look at this, we get 37% of our revenue from property tax. It can only grow by 1% plus new construction. And then we're spending 32% of our money on public safety, which increased 13 or 14% in just 1 year. When 32% of your budget is going up 13 to 14% a year, and almost 40% of your revenue can only go up 1%, that's a structural problem. That's not a problem that can be fixed by trimming the fat. Not to say there's not fat to be trimmed, but that in the grand scheme of things, over time, will get us to a place that is completely untenable, even if we trimmed all the fat. The state has put us into a completely untenable structural deficit situation in the long term, regardless of what we do. That's just something that we need to, that needs to be said, that we need to accept. And that is why we need to figure out how we address this. The other problem is that the tools the state gives us are incredibly regressive in nature. Sales tax is terrible in my book. I'm not a huge fan. Utility taxes, taxing people's basics like internet. Not a fan of going down that road. One of the first times I was on the tail end of a 6-1 vote was increasing, I think it was our water utility franchise fee or whatever, our water tax. I can't remember exactly what it was. Because again, somebody who's making $50,000 is not using 10 times, 1/10 of the water of somebody making $500,000 a year. These things hit poor folks at a much higher percentage of their income than it hits folks who are well off. We even heard that during public comment today. Somebody said that, they're not going to leave if we raise taxes. They can afford the property taxes, but we'll drive out our lower income folks. And that is a legitimate point. I won't be driven out of Kenmore by additional taxes, but there are folks who aren't as well off who will be. And that's why I think if we are going to be looking at these really regressive revenue solutions, then we do need to figure out a way to rebate some of our lower income folks. And we've shown that we can do that in the past with the direct cash assistance that we did, the Kenmore Cares Fund that we did with the ARPA funds from the feds. So we have a model in place to do some of that. And, if we do end up going down this road with some of these increased taxes, I'll be pushing heavily to make sure that we are trying to rebate folks back as much of that as we can for our lower income folks, because the tools the state gives us are frankly terrible. I really wish that as a state, we would just grow up and do a graduated income tax like almost everybody else. But instead we are stuck with nickel and diming people with 1,000 different little things. And it irritates everybody. It irritates us when we have to vote, when we have to do these things. It irritates all of our constituents when they see one more line on their cell phone bill, or they see the additional $20 or $40 when they're renewing their car tabs. Like, the way that we do taxation in the state is backwards, and we need to fix that. But in the meantime, these are tools we have. They stink. I'll just say that. But also, we need to continue doing our job as a city and providing the level of services that our residents expect from us. All that said, I really appreciate everything you put in here, and I appreciate the very tough job that you had. So thank you for that. And I did want to point out one small irony. The irony is, if we take that 1%, that 0.1% sales tax for public safety from the county, the irony is it'll go directly back to King County when we're paying our KCSO contract. Like, directly right back to them. But at least we'll be getting 100% of it directly right back to them instead of just 40% of it directly right back to them. Councilmember Lutzes.
Yeah, I had a couple of things really quickly I did want to thank you all for the time and effort put into this. This is phenomenal, fantastic. These recommendations I appreciate based on how measured out they are. Understanding, the burdens on residents when imposing these sources of revenue for the city, pushing them out as far out as possible, and doing a thorough analysis and evaluation of internal cuts and efficiencies that could be done. I also wanted to recognize the fact that the entire task force itself is a free source of professional services for the city, which is in line with what we're looking for here. I look at this group in front of me, both in the crowd and up here. And I mean, there's such a wealth of knowledge. There are folks who work professionally in financial services all across the board, and to be able to utilize and use these services to benefit our community is for no cost, I think is absolutely exceptional. So thank you. Just to re-echo what the mayor said, I think it is important that we look at taking our share from the county where we can and keeping it here local to support Kenmore residents and our needs here, whether that be the sales tax and trying to capture that earlier on, as well as the lodging tax. And because, as you mentioned, that's already in place. This wouldn't be a new tax levied for the lodging tax, but it would be something that we'd capture back from the county to use back here at home. One question I did have really quickly, which Mr. City Manager, you might be able to assist in answering, is I know that there was a jump from our conversations at the retreat about looking at different options and considerations to the final presentation put forward here. And I have to say that I do appreciate this, and I do like this all across the board. One of the things that I did happen to notice that's different between our conversations last week and what's in front of us now is human services. I know that was a big topic of discussion last week, was the potential of imposing a human services levy. Yet looking through the recommendations, I know that that's absent, and I'm kind of curious what the consideration was on behalf of the task force on that, and maybe where that shift is prioritization when it comes to the services the levy was looking to potentially provide. How's that going to really shake out with the recommendations here?
So I'm not sure we actually ever talked as a group for a levy, but we wanted to be supportive of the needs for residents, specifically the lower income ones, with regards to housing and human services provided to them. And I think from our perspective, the suggestions with regards to human services weren't a levy, but were the breakdown that you have here of the caseworker / support yet to be defined in its modalities, as well as the utility tax rebate program.
Yes.
But so those were the limitations of the extent of our considerations from a human services perspective. We did not consider a human services levy that I'm aware of.
That's all right. Thank you for answering my
Yeah,
question.
the task force members, we all shared the sentiment that this is a really tough problem to solve with the tools that we have without being very regressive and impacting. And so, we used and I appreciate what Kenmore has done. I just want to call out the tool, the DEI lens framework tool. We used that. Every single conversation that we had was framed in that. And we had several task members that came from different areas, that had different perspectives, some that attend a lot of the North Shore School District discussions and chimed in. Tiff Stoner provided that perspective a lot, just a lot of these different, trying to think about these in different ways. And so this was our best way to try to mitigate that, was trying to add these programs to the budget. Thank you.
Well, we didn't really discuss the housing levy. We also really never discussed even cuts to our existing housing and human services.
Councilmember Culver and then Councilmember Shribnick.
Yeah, a few things to jump in on. First off, obviously they've all said it. Y'all rock. You did amazing things. This helped really I think, focus and inform and generate a more involved and nuanced conversation. So thank you all for your work. You're amazing. Some of this is just laying down markers of things I support and a couple other ideas that I hadn't seen discussed as much. Human services, big thumbs up, slam dunk, yes. Economic development, I just wanted to +1 what y'all said about being very strategic, being very thoughtful about that. I mentioned at the retreat, but I'll surface again here, like we had a pretty big initiative around this a number of years ago, and some of that was wins, some of that was like, this particular arrangement didn't work out, and we sort of scaled it back with the pandemic. So I would just re-up, like, let's look at what went well so that we can make V2 a banger, you know? Number 3, I guess, +1 on Mayor Herbig with CAPE. It was among the top of your list, so yeah, absolutely. A separate idea, which I don't have a ton of examples for, but if you go back to the boxes with, yes, charges for services at 4%. I don't have many great examples of this, but I went looking, how do other cities solve this stuff? And we've talked about some of those solutions. I looked at like the average city, I forget if it was mean or median or what, but that chunk is like huge. It's like 20, 25, 30%. Like the only idea I can immediately come up with, I know Lake Forest Park does it, is like passport services, right? Helping people get the paperwork and stuff. I'm sure there's a laundry list of other things there, but that to me speaks to revenue opportunity that isn't just, cool, we're gonna, keep pulling the string of increasing taxes, which everybody loves, obviously. So why wouldn't we do that? I'm being sarcastic for the record. Other things we could potentially sell, other revenue sources that aren't so tax specific. Solar energy, something to consider. That's a longer play. Hopefully not that long though. Last one, it's a contentious issue. If we can talk about it without causing a big dust up, card room. That used to be a significant source of tax revenue for the city and employment. There's a whole bunch of considerations to that, so I'm not going to do an artful job of wrapping it back up, but I just wondered if that's something as a community we could open back up to talk about on a longer arc, not tonight. Final thing. Oh, just like about going to the ballot. We're going to get into process in a second, so this is my last bit, but it does feel a little late to be going to the ballot with something that isn't Lake Point, right? We've set sort of an expectation with the community. Hey, this is in the works, it's happening, and I don't think we have a conclusion yet that we're ready to deliver for November. So I would lay that down. But yeah, y'all rock again, and I yield. Thank you.
Yeah, we did discuss gambling tax as a revenue source. It was something that there really wasn't a way to say, okay, this is how much it would bring in. There was discussions with the bowling alley to see if they were interested in starting that up, and there wasn't. So there really wasn't a way to say, put a number to that if we did decide to put that in our recommendation. Not to say that you all can't choose to do it at any time. So without the card room, we're stuck with the claw machine at Safeway and the pull tabs. Okay. And I also wanted to, so you were talking about the utility tax rebate. You might notice on there, we delayed that a couple of years, so it will be covered actually even now. So I guess it's through the ARPA funds now. And then it will go towards, then come out of the general fund after that. Right? That's the way we had it set up. Right.
Councilor Shripnick?
Well, you might have just answered my question, because I also wanted to put in the hopper the card room and the gambling tax. It was generating upwards of $1 million, and that was when it was discontinued over a decade ago. So it would be a significant revenue source. So it's disappointing that to hear that that the business that housed it is not interested in that. So I also wanted to reconsider that.
Any further questions? Councilor Marshall?
Yeah, just very brief history on that. I recall like maybe 3 years ago or so, there was like an outside business person of some sort who more like was suggesting he would engender some partnership with the bowling alley or something like that. So it may not foreclose the issue if the bowling alley itself isn't interested in it, unless they've explicitly stated that, but you guys talked with them more than I had.
Yeah, no, so great points. I think one of the limitations that we had, one of many, is also our inability to forecast what is hard to forecast. So typically, if there's a lack of appetite for reopening the card room, then our ability to forecast the amount of revenues that a gambling tax would have is not there. So there are some recommendations that didn't make it because the task force members didn't necessarily have the appetite, but there are some also that while we might have had the appetite, we were not able to size it. And therefore, we didn't want to make it in those recommendations because we would have given you a recommendation, or specifically given Rob and Melinda a recommendation that would have been, yeah, it works. And we felt that you collectively deserve way better than that, which is why some things that we might have discussed didn't make it in the end because of that.
And then on the CAPE timing that a few of you have mentioned, the task force is generally very supportive of the CAPE program, and as soon as possible. The timing reflected on here is more of what we understood the logistics to be with some of the additional regulations that were passed recently. There needs to be DEI studies, there needs to be some of these assessments. So the elementary schools, those are probably no brainer. There's probably that might be really easy to implement and get those done and generating revenue earlier, but any other cameras may require some additional. So just wanted to give that clarification that we're generally supportive of getting those implemented as soon. We just wanted to make sure we had enough room.
Councilor Culver?
Yeah, just a tiny to jump onto the gambling tax. I remembered seeing it and thank you for clarifying. Just a small process piece for it, I guess. We do have a gambling tax, yeah, for pull tabs and crane stuff. So that procedurally, that would be, I think, if I'm not mistaken, repealing an ordinance that currently bans card tables. And I know there's history on how that came to be in a court case. We don't need to get into all that, but just talking through the procedural mechanisms after we were to make a decision about whether to go forward with that. So thank you.
Any further questions? All right, well, I want to thank you so much for the presentation. Like I said, one of the most thorough things I've seen. Gave us a lot to think about, so thank you very much. And unless there's any objection, I would propose that we take a 5-minute break. So we'll be back, let's say 9:53.
Your Honor, would it be okay if you all took a picture with the task force?
Sure, of course.
Okay,
That'll
thanks.
extend our break, but yes.
Okay.
Ian, this is Anastasia, the city clerk. I want to test your mic. Can you hear us?
Yep. Can you hear
Very
me?
nice. We hear you too.
Great.
All right, next on the agenda, Love Where You Live Phase 2 feedback presented by Communications and Tourism Manager Lauren Homiak and ENC Consultant Ian Stewart. I don't think your mic is on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm back again to present our results of Phase 2 of the Love Where You Live project community engagement. I do want to point out this was a presentation that we gave at the council retreat last week, but we really wanted to provide a lot of exposure for the community and make sure the community saw these results because they really came out and provided a lot of great feedback. So we want them to be able to see the results of that work. So I'm going to share my results and then we're going to have Ian from EMC Research hop on and go over the results of the second statistically valid survey that was conducted in March. And then because this is a brief overview tonight, just pointing out for the public that in the agenda packet tonight is a full summary of all the results of the last year's work through the Love Where You Live project. So it has results from Phase 1, including our community outreach booths and the first statistically valid survey we did, all the raw data and the notes that were taken at the community workshops, and then also the results from our second statistically valid survey. So people can dive into that if they want more. Just a recap of the Love Where You Live project. It's our year-long community engagement effort that kicked off the summer of last year with the goal of gathering broad feedback from the community on their values and priorities for the future of Kenmore. And our goal was really to connect with as many community members as possible and use a new way of engagement called the Dream, Play, Build method, which asks people to be a little bit more creative and think outside the box when they're thinking about the future of their city. So Phase 1, I'm going to go really fast. I know it's late tonight. So we collected over 1,100 responses in the summer through 22 community engagement booths and an online survey. We also conducted our first statistically valid survey. And from there, the top themes that emerged were community spaces and economic development. So that really informed how to take the process into Phase 2. And so because of those strong themes in future development, we decided to focus on Kenmore's downtown and Lake Point when we're talking about those community spaces and economic development. Okay, so Phase 2, just an overview of what we did. It took place in February and March of this year. We held 4 in-person community workshops out in the community. We were at Kenmore Middle School, the Kenmore Community Club, Morelands Elementary, and the Hangar. The Hangar was by far the most well-attended event. It was packed in there that day. And with the 4 workshops, we had about 200 attendees. And we asked the attendees to use their hands and imaginations and a bunch of found objects like clay, pipe cleaners, building blocks to build 3D expressions of what they would like to see for the future of downtown and Lake Point. And through the workshops and also through our accompanying online survey, we received 550 new ideas in addition to the 1,100 that we had already collected. And we really worked hard to make it a fun, inviting, positive atmosphere for the community. The Dream Play Build method is already pretty lighthearted and creative, but we took it to the next level and included kids' activities, had treats from a local bakery. We had a Spanish translator, lively music playing, and this was just intentional. We wanted to invite the community into a really positive, welcoming space, open to discussions and conversations, where people felt comfortable sharing their ideas. It also was a really nice opportunity for staff to connect directly with the community. There was a lot of staff from different departments represented at every single one of the workshops. And so I heard so many conversations outside of downtown and Lake Point, and just the ability for community members to ask staff questions about their work. It was really great to see that. So thank you to all of the city staff. Like I said, representatives from every department helped out. It was really a team effort. So we collected those 550 total ideas. And, in phase one, we were lucky enough to partner with UW Bothell, and they coded and analyzed and organized those 1,100 responses and put together an amazing presentation. And unfortunately, we did not have the students' help this time around, but I did take the lessons we learned from them and kind of kept the same presentation method and the same data organization methods that they used to keep it consistent. So let's talk about what we heard in the workshops. Here's a word cloud of just some of the most popular words that came up through all of the responses we received. So you can see here for yourself, lots of interesting ideas, but the big ones that pop out are park, space, restaurants, water, housing, pedestrians, bikes, connections, gathering, basketball, picnics, food. But one word that really sticks out to me that I think is the theme of this is the word more. So people are looking for more in both of these locations and in Kenmore in general. So what we're looking at, so like I said, at the workshops, we had two sections, a downtown table and a Lake Point table where people could build on these big maps. And so we're gonna look first at what we heard at the Lake Point table. We received 308 responses about Lake Point in those 4 workshops. And the top themes were outdoor recreation with 29%, economic development with 21% of the responses, ped bike access at 11%, environment at 10%, open space 9%, housing 5%, a rec center or a pool at 4%, an amphitheater at 3%, traffic and parking at 1%, and then that et cetera category was our catch-all for items that didn't fit anywhere else. And I'm gonna dig deeper into those top 2 themes, but overall, what we heard at the workshops is that people want to be outdoors with more spaces to be active and with more access to the water. People want more local shopping options. They do not want to travel outside of Kenmore to spend their money if they don't have to. They want more improved and thoughtful connections between downtown and Lake Point if it does get developed, and solid access for pedestrians and cyclists if we do create that space, and then to restore and protect the environment. At the workshops, here's some images that of the things people built on the map, and some ideas that we heard. So something attracting people to go there, businesses, living spaces that are inviting, a public boardwalk, docks with canoe and kayak moorage, a mound of green space like Gasworks Park, a public boardwalk, salmon habitat restoration, keeping the vibe funky, which just, I think with Sarah Saloom Hayashi's thing tonight, we should all carry that forward and keeping Kenmore unique and funky. A lake beach park and scenic viewpoints, a rec center, and waterfront restaurants and shopping. So diving into those top 2 Lake Point themes from what we heard, outdoor recreation was 29% of the total responses that we received for Lake Point. And the top category was walking trails and fitness. And this category covered things like walking paths, biking trails, an outdoor fitness park, and pickleball and basketball courts. The next top theme for outdoor recreation at Lake Point was water access, with public access to the shoreline, docks, a beach, hand carry watercraft access, a boat launch, and direct access to the lake. And then athletic fields came in third, and this was specifically baseball fields, soccer fields, and or multi-purpose sports fields. Then you'll see beyond that, there's boat moorage, playground, scenic views, a dog park, and bikes for the other top recreation categories. Then the second top category in Lake Point was economic development with 21% of our total responses. Not surprisingly, restaurants and grocery stores was the #1 category there with 50%. Then it goes to shopping at 21%. Tourism, so, fun things that would provide more tourism opportunities in Kenmore at 12%. Mixed use retail at 10%, and then that et cetera category. Yes.
I'm just trying to understand the difference between shopping and mixed-use retail.
Yeah, mixed use retail was people saying they, kind of that walkable urban village. They want a variety of retail stores of versus like shopping boutiques, places to go shop. So there was a difference between a lot of people saying the, walkable urban village with a more diverse array of stores there that aren't necessarily all shopping.
Thank you.
Yep. So we're going to go into what we heard at the downtown table. And one thing that I think is interesting to point out is at Lake Point, we received 308 responses, and downtown we received 114. And it was the same workshops, the same opportunity. So I think that again just shows people's enthusiasm around Lake Point. People were a little more drawn to that table or naturally had ideas for what they wanted to see there. So I thought that was interesting that Lake Point almost had 3 times the total number of responses in our workshops. But of the 114 downtown responses we received, economic development was #1, ped bike access was #2, parking and transportation was #3, arts and beautification at #4, then outdoor recreation, open space and gardens, housing, the rec center, and that et cetera category. I'm going to go into the top theme of economic development, but overall what we heard for downtown is that theme of more. People want more restaurants, they want more shopping, they want more walkability, they want more parking, and they want more connection across the city. So that was the same at both Lake Point and downtown, that idea of more connection. Here are some images of what was built on our downtown map, and just a couple of the interesting ideas that came out of the workshops were neighborhood markets with health conscious products, a landmark overpass over 522, a balance of growth plus existing businesses, light art around the city, which I thought was an interesting idea, more flowers, plants, and greenery, gymnasium and climbing wall, locally sourced restaurants, and an urban greenhouse or community garden. That downtown, that #1 theme of economic development, this is the breakdown of those responses. Again, #1 beat out restaurants, #1 shopping beat out restaurants here for downtown. Shopping was 38% of the total responses, then restaurant and grocery at 28%, that mixed use retail idea at 18%. More businesses that provide job opportunities in Kenmore was 7%, and then that et cetera category was another 7%. We did have an online survey that was open during the same time as the workshops, and anyone was available or able to fill out the form online to fill out the survey for phase 2. And we received 130 total online responses. And I thought it was helpful to keep this data separate. I think the online experience was a lot different than the in-person experience, especially when people were able to have discussions with staff and their neighbors at the workshops. But we did get a good response to the survey, and we received a large influx of responses after an email was sent out to families who are part of sports teams. And so a lot of people responded that day. And so it was great to see that response. It was great to see those people in the audience tonight. And I just want to point out on here, I kept outdoor recreation as the category so that it was consistent with our other donut charts. But I want to point out that in outdoor recreation, both for downtown and Lake Point, almost 100% of those responses were athletic fields. Yes.
Just a quick question. Was there, when it came to receiving these responses, was there any way to distinguish multiple responses from a single device, or how is that sort of sorted to prevent repeats or consider
Yes, so
that?
we're able to put kind of restriction by IP address. And I believe we did like a 48-hour restriction, so the same person couldn't just fill out over and over again. There is some limitations to that, but that's one thing we put in place.
And based on the questions, is there something that asks if they're a Kenmore resident versus an outside resident, maybe based in the North Shore area?
Yes, in this one there is. So you can actually see if you dig into the online workshop results, people, it's an optional choice to fill that out. But we did ask if people were Kenmore residents or not.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So yeah, those were the online responses. And so just some main themes and takeaways from the phase 2 of our outreach. Overall, the community is very excited for future opportunities at Lake Point and downtown. We had hardly anyone that showed up to the workshop saying do nothing. Everyone came full of ideas, and again, that theme of wanting more. Economic development, especially bringing additional restaurants and shops to Kenmore, were the top priority for both locations. In general, the community is seeking more opportunities for outdoor recreation and access to the water, and they would like to see more open space and multi-use facilities. And so many comments about people enjoying the parks that we already have and wanting more of those experiences. Like I've said, many of the comments and ideas reflected a need for overall connectivity around the city, how we're going to get people around, how people can be safe traveling around our city, and providing that connection for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers. And then lastly, the community is open to engagement. All 4 workshops were super positive. There were new people there at each event. People came wanting to engage and be positive and interact with the city. So the term you've heard me use before is new places, new faces, but I just think we should continue to get outside of City Hall when we can to do our community engagement and meet people where they are and find new, interesting, and unique locations that we can host these types of events. So next up, I'm going to hand it over to Ian from EMC Research. He is going to give an overview of our statistically valid survey results. It was administered by EMC Research in March of this year. For this survey, we had 303 respondents, which does make it statistically valid with our population size. And so I'm going to pass it over to Ian. He's going to give his presentation, and then I have one follow-up slide at the end to kind of recap some comparisons between our statistically valid survey and then these results that I've shown you tonight. So hopefully Ian's online.
I am. I'm here.
Ian.
And I will start sharing my screen. Thank you for allowing me to join virtually tonight. I was in DC last week and picked something up, some sort of respiratory thing. So if I have to pause and cough, you'll know why I've vanished. But to get us started, can you see my screen? Can you see a presentation there? Great. I see lots of thumbs. Before I get started on that, it's beneficial to put these two back to back, because what Lauren just presented you, as you all know, cities do public involvement all the time. And that's a critical part of what cities need to do. Sometimes the challenge with that becomes, as you just indicated, that when people are coming, you're hearing from who shows up in the room, right? And so the point of doing a survey like this that I'm about to show you is to go from a statistical perspective and say, if we were to sample a portion of the city and project it to everyone, what would it look like and how would it differ? And so I'm going to show you a different set of questions that we talked about when I saw you last in December, but go in new territory and some familiar territory from what we just talked about. So let's talk about the methodology. This was a multimodal survey. So what that means is we do an email, text to web, and a live telephone survey, mostly via cell phone, some landlines still. This is all of registered voters in the city. The survey was conducted the 20th to the 3rd of March to April. 303 interviews, as Lauren indicated. Total margin of error is exactly the same as the rest of these, 5.6 percentage points. You can see all the previous surveys we've conducted going back to 2015 for you at the bottom. They're all roughly the same sample size, which is about the biggest sample we can really get in a city of your size. The interviews, when they are live interviewers, they are done with the same script every time, trained that way. Okay, you've seen a survey like this, the question like this before. The right direction, wrong track question. This is really one of the reasons we show you this is because we have longitudinal data now. We can show you how things have changed over time. And really between December 23 and now, there's very little change in the right direction, wrong track numbers have kind of stayed really consistent. One of the first questions we asked about Lake Point we tried to summarize it here for people, and you can see, obviously, this doesn't do the same job as what you would get in a session where you're actually able to touch and feel things and see stuff on boards and comment. But we try to summarize for people what's happening at Lake Point. And if you look there, you've had a chance to read it along as I've been talking here. We describe what Lake Point is and where it's at, and that it's an undeveloped piece of land, and that some people have proposed that the city purchase this and turn it into a park, and that the remaining portion will be purchased by a private developer and turned into an urban village with rental, residential units, restaurant, shops, and office space. In general, and of course, I want to emphasize the in general, we just support or oppose this concept. And you can see the support here is overwhelmingly high, right? And this is much of what you saw in Lauren's presentation. When people came up, they were excited about this idea. You remember maybe in December, maybe you don't, we talked about intensity. So here we've got this question on a 4-point scale, 2 on the strongly, right? Strongly and somewhat support. And on the other side, we have strongly and somewhat opposed. And you can see 80% total support with a majority there in the strongly support. So clearly the concept, as the way we described it, really popular, right? Not too surprising based on what you've heard so far. Now, when we go and ask about this connected to actual funding, and you just talked about this, I joined a little early and heard you talking about the challenges that local cities face when we talk about financing. This is tying Lake Point to the idea of a Metropolitan Parks District. And so in this question, this is only question 4, so we're really early in the survey, right? We asked here and said, all right, what if the Metropolitan Parks District that would levy taxes that would help do this work at Lake Point, would do shoreline habitat restoration, create this new park and other recreation amenities, but also help with the city's park maintenance and help with the parks and recreation cost. We then describe who would govern it. We describe how much authority it would have, 75 cents per thousand, but that the city would only use 46 cents of it now, which would cost the average homeowner about $38 a month or $456 per year. We support or oppose this idea. You'll notice if we go back and forth at 80% going to 54, right? The concept, overwhelmingly popular. The actual money, not quite as popular, but still a majority, right? 54%. Notice where the intensity here is on the strongly support and strongly oppose, just about even, right? Slight advantage to the oppose, but isn't a terrible place to be, right? A 54-45, a majority saying they support this concept. Not necessarily we want to be to see this go forward, right? 54, you don't have to lose much to be under majority, but at least it gives you a sense of we actually attach a number to the lofty idea of Lake Point in general, what happens to the support levels. The next part of the survey, we have a series. These are all randomized, right? So they don't appear in the same order for anybody. And what you're looking at is, in fact, what they heard with one exception. The third one down there, I had to truncate a little bit to get on the screen. But we described to people the potential items that could be included in the park in Lake Point. And then, again, these are randomized. We say, all right, how important is that to you on a scale of 1 to 7? 1, not at all important. 7 being extremely important. You're seeing the 5s and 6s, that's the light blue, and the 7s, the extremely important. So this gives you a sense of when we do these in a randomized order, what comes out on top, not just what came out in the public comment section where people can come and say whatever they wanted and vote for the, and they had to create their own categories, right? We created these for them. Nature paths and trails with viewing docks, restoration of fish and wildlife habitat, and open multi-use grass fields. Those are all 60 or 7% total importance. But look at the first two and how the extremely important there stands out. You can see those are 40%-ish each in terms of extremely important. Nothing else really comes close. In fact, those two, the 40% actually exceeds the extremely important, any of the 5, 6, and 7s if you go down to the bottom. It gives you a sense of how widely appealing these first three or four items are, right? We are majority saying this is important. Again, anything above a 4 here would be considered important. So the cutoff there is the amphitheater. That's where at 50%, everything above that is important to a majority with increasing levels of intensity. Going below that, we're dropping below 50%, right? So now people are saying you're getting some 4s, 3s, and 2s and 1s for these items down at the bottom. But again, just showing you the 5 and 6 and above of what that is. We're now in the 30s when you get down to the bottom of those items of athletic fields, off-leash parks, and splash pads. So this kind of gives you a sense of when we offer these items and randomize it, what happens when we talk to the whole city about what's important to people that they might want to see at Lake Point. Okay, we're going to change things up a little bit. This asks a totally different set of questions, but also related to the project we just talked about, right? So when we talk about downtown amenities, similar kind of idea on a priority scale now. We read a series of amenities that could be part of the future downtown of Kenmore. And once again, same idea on the scale, 1 to 7. In this instance, we're talking about it being a very high priority down to not a priority at all. So once again, 5 and 6 is combined together in light blue, the highest priority of the 7. You've already noticed one that stands out here above all the rest, right? More restaurant and dining options, 42% very high priority. Nothing even comes close to that in terms of intensity. Everything else is way underneath that, a third or less in terms of overall intensity. At total priority, it's about 75%. So 3/4 of people saying that's what is number one. The next one, small locally owned shopping boutiques, the intensity drops off a lot, but the total importance is still in the 60s, right? But those are the only two that we find that reach above 50%. Everything else is below that with, as you can see, we're into the low double digits in terms of intensity, right? All these 16, 13%. As you go down to the bottom, we're at about 30% total being a priority or anything over 4. So this gives you a sense of what is the future, what are the priorities for future of downtown, and where do people put their priority measurements for what they'd like to see. Okay, now changing gears entirely. This question we asked here was about the property tax caps, and we wanted to try to give you a sense of how are people feeling about the property taxes right now. So we described this intro and we said, all right, 20 years ago, Washington State was limited to property tax collections of 1% per year. Some people said local governments have struggled with this and replaced that 1% cap with a rate that is tied to inflation. It would help city budgets and it would keep up with the rate of inflation, whether it's positive or negative. You support or oppose tying the property tax in Kenmore to collect that matches the inflation rate. Right now, the opposition to this is 63%. We've asked this at different times when inflation wasn't quite as bad. We saw support levels that were actually a majority at parts of the state. And so one of the questions was, could that be possible here? The answer is decidedly no right now. And I think it makes a lot of sense when you think about where inflation is. So it gives you a sense of the challenges that city face. All the cities across the state face the same challenge of inflation tying their hands. And so this gives you a sense of where voters are on this question with the strongly opposed at 40%. It's actually bigger than the support, but hopefully you get a sense of that from this. So then that begs the question, what do people want to see you do about this? Now, when we think about polling, we ask these questions. We've said here is, okay, well, Kenmore is in fact facing the structural budget problem. Property taxes, as you talked about before I joined, property taxes are a big part of the city's support and can only increase 1% a year, but inflation has been up at 9%, which means the city can't keep these existing service levels the same and keep the budget balanced. So what should the city do? We give people a forced choice. When we talk about forced choices, we've given them 3 choices here. One choice, maintain the current city services and allow taxes to keep with inflation. That's the choice of 16% of respondents. Use a combination of service cuts and tax increases to cover the structural deficit. A majority gets there. And then 27% say keep taxes the same and cut service levels every year. But you could build a pretty big majority out of either of these combinations, right? So you could say, take that 51% and find some taxes and services that you like and cut in a couple of places. You'd find a happy medium with a larger majority of people. So you'd also do the same in the reverse and cutting more services and only raising a couple taxes. You find a larger majority in either instance. So it gives you a sense that you're not without some options here, right? There is openness in the city to this argument. The challenge is going to be, right, that remember in these polls, people have perfect information. So they're getting all the pieces here. They're getting all the background. They're getting all the details. You don't always have the chance, as you know, to communicate all that with them. So, but hopefully this gives you a sense of where you can grow on this concept. All right, changing gears again to affordable housing. So we asked another forced choice here, which would be closer to your own opinion. And then we actually do force people to go one way or the other. The city should be responsible only for planning for affordable housing projects in Kenmore as required by law, or the alternative. And they hear both of these before they choose them, and they're rotated. So not everyone hears them in the same order. The city should not just plan for affordable housing projects, it should take a more active role and use city tax dollars to subsidize the building of more affordable housing units in Kenmore. So the big majority here, the super majority, is actually on the city should be responsible just for planning as required by law. And this, again, you could word this a couple different ways. This is the way we chose to word this in this instance. You might argue with me that the second choice is not right. But I think you could probably find a medium there where you might say, all right, if I worded it differently, it might go this way or that way. But at least for this role, this is the forced choice that we gave people and offered it to them. You can see the result. More questions on affordable housing. This is a series of questions on an agree-disagree scale. So 4 points in this agree-disagree, just like you saw earlier. Strongly agree and somewhat agree. Those are in the blue. The strongly agree is the dark blue. And the disagree is in the pink and the red there, right? The somewhat disagree in the pink, strongly disagree in the red. And then we've totaled them for you on the right. The total agree, total disagree, and the net agree. In this instance, everyone is in net agreement. The only question is how big and how intense. So as you've had a chance to read these probably before me, one of the most popular here where we talk about housing is we need more housing in Kenmore that's affordable for teachers, first responders, and people working in the trades. The total agreement, 83%, and look at the strongly agree, 55%. So even a majority here are strongly agreeing with this. That's the only one that gets a majority to strongly agree. Let's move down to the next one. The total agreement, it's still 3/4. So we're off the charts in terms of agreement here. We need more housing in Kenmore that's affordable for working class families earning less than 100K per year. The strongly agree almost gets to the majority, but you can see the total agreement, 78%. Again, all these are agreement at some degree. The only question is to what degree, right? I'm concerned about senior citizens being priced out of their homes, 76%. I'm concerned about Kenmore's youth being able to grow up and afford housing in Kenmore when they grow up, 69, and we need more housing in Kenmore, low income, disadvantaged individuals families can afford at 62%. So all these really big agreements. So I'm going to go to the second tier now, and you'll notice I'm just going to go, before I even do that, look at the visual, right? Look at the blue bars, right? Same scale, agree, disagree. But these ones, the agreement we're now either 50% or below. These statements, I'm concerned about being priced on my own home, definite split here, about half and half saying yes, I am, or no, I'm not. We need more housing in Kenmore for families experiencing homelessness. This is clearly divided. One of the reasons you've been facing this question a lot in your council meetings, you have an even division in the city on this topic. And in fact, it's almost evenly divided in terms of strongly agree, somewhat disagree, and strongly disagree. So you've got people on the far end of each side and some people in the middle. So that's why you're hearing a lot about it. We need more housing in Kenmore for individuals experiencing homelessness. Now we're dropping below a majority agree and a majority disagree, 54%. You can see now we're going to negative in terms of net agree. And then finally, city work with housing developers to subsidize building more housing in Kenmore. If individuals coming out of homelessness, we're still a majority disagree. But again, it's really close, right? 47-53 indicates one of the reasons why the majority, the intensity is on the strongly disagree side, as you noticed, but it is pretty evenly divided. It gives you a sense of why you keep seeing this in your council meetings, why it's a big issue of conversation in the city. So I've covered everything I intended to cover here. Just to recap briefly, we saw a lot of enthusiasm for Lake Point as a concept, and there's lots of amenities that are appealing with nature paths and trails and shoreline habitat restoration right at the top of the list. But we actually attached this to Metropolitan Parks District. We did in fact get a majority, a slim one, but a slim majority saying they'd be in favor of supporting the Metro Parks District at the rate we offered to help support and construct and work on Lake Point. Then we asked some very divergent budget questions. We talked about the city's future budget operations, hopefully gave you some ideas on how you might go about attacking that are acceptable to a majority or even bigger of citizens, about how you might go about doing this. And then finally, we talked about a whole series of affordable housing questions that should give you a better sense of what the opennesses of Kenmore residents are to supporting some kind of affordable housing packages in the city. So I made it through all that without coughing. So I will stop sharing and see if you had any questions that I can go back over. I see a hand up, but I can't tell who it is.
Deputy Mayor?
On the Lake Point, putting our money, putting the money to the survey, do you think if the survey had been at a lower levy amount of, say, 50 cents as a max or 40 or 30, the support might have gone up? Because essentially what you had proposed or what was proposed in the survey was the maximum that we could potentially put on that concept. So I was just curious if, do you think that the amount had an impact on the response?
I'm gonna share my screen again because I want to make sure that I'm being clear on what the language was that we used. Can you see my slide again? That slide that we talked about? Okay, so I think there's two notes here. One, we say that the MPD would have the authority to levy 75 cents, but the city would only use 46, and that's the calculation we use there, right? So I think there's two factors here. One, did everyone catch that we weren't saying it's 75 cents? So that's one part of confusion, but more than likely, that's not what matters to people. What matters to people is how much am I paying per month and how much am I paying per year, right? And my answer back to you is if you went lower than 46 cents, definitely it would change support levels if you went down from that. The question becomes, what's a meaningful difference from 46, right, per year? If you're going to say it's going down to 430 or something, probably not going to change the support levels all that much, right? You have to have a significant delta between the cost per month, cost per year to really start seeing some differences in increase in support. I can't really quantify it for you here because, again, we didn't spend a lot of time on the specific question. But yes, as you decrease the tax amount, the cost per month, the cost per year, the support levels are going to go up. I don't have a one-to-one ratio of what it's going to look like for you.
I thought that what you presented was interesting, and it was nice to see that much support for what would probably be on the high side of what we've discussed. So thank you.
Councilmember Lucis.
First of all, again, I just want to thank you for bringing this before us. It's always very useful to have statistically valid surveys in terms of making the best policy. I did have one question on the additional amenities for Lake Point Park slide, the one with the red bars that asked about what amenities or features people would like to see.
This one?
Not that one. It had red. Oh, maybe it's not included in your presentation.
Yeah, we have
here.
a shorter, this is a shorter version than what you might have in your
Yeah,
deck.
I think so. So I
okay.
apologize, but I still think it's relevant in asking that in this particular slide, when it asks what amenities would people like to see, there's a significant chunk, 40% of respondents didn't respond, refused to respond, said don't know, and then another 15% said other, which adds up to 55%. And so how does that really play into helping us determine the direction of the desire for which kind of amenities at Lake Point?
So I think I've caught up with you as we've been talking here, and I think I have that presentation. So hold on a second. And then I can show the slide and we can all be talking about the same thing here.
That's the question. That's the question where it says, are there any other amenities you'd like to see?
Yeah, I think I have it.
Open response,
that's
verbatim
right.
responses. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. The wonders of having a server that lets you get this stuff. Is this the one you're talking about?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
It was
All right.
just striking to see the significant bars that certainly outweigh everything else.
Yeah, so one thing to remember about this question is that it comes at the very end of us grilling them about a bunch of other stuff, right? Where we basically gave them a series of categories that they could pick from and said, here's all the stuff that might be in here. Did we miss anything, right? So I'm not surprised that the nothing is there because a lot of people at the end of that should be like, I can't think of anything else that I would, like there's nothing burning in my mind. So the way I would look at this is to say someone was so motivated to tell us there was something we missed that it made this list, right? So you can say there's a passion for one of those that somebody said, I didn't hear my thing in what you described to me. That's how I'd look at this slide, right? It was really designed to be a catch-all at the end to say, did we miss anything big? I think I would argue back to you that most of the items that are in here probably included in some version of what we had before, but we obviously couldn't describe them to them. But does that help?
Yeah, I think so. I was just curious about the significance or applicability of this slide if it is just sort of a catch-all sort of other, and the majority is saying either other or nothing, if we should even pay much attention to what this.
Yeah, so
offer.
I would interpret this nothing as I can't really add anything to what you gave me.
Yeah.
Other, whenever we do a category like this, you're going to find these are like less than 1% responses, so like a 0.5, 1% total. So you're looking at, like 4 people saying something, right? So it's not going to be a significant response. And the rest of these, again, if I'm comparing to the list of items we gave people, right? We weren't as explicit with each of these items being in there, but we alluded to some of them being included. So I wouldn't call this, the whole reason we do the catch-all is to make sure that we're not infallible. We're not going to get everything right? So did we actually cover everything that might be in here? Is there some burning item that we've completely missed the boat on, to use a Lake Point metaphor, that we should be including? I don't see it here.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification on that.
Of course.
Councilmember Culver.
Good boat pun. I like that. +1. Indulge me, Ian, if you could, with a counterfactual hot take. I'm looking at this. City should subsidize housing for individuals coming out of homelessness. Obviously, somewhat charged language in there, as you said. And as you noted, 4753. That's close. In the hypothetical alternative scenario where we put Plymouth to a ballot, could it have passed? Hot take. What do you think?
That's a great question. Hold on, I'm going to share this slide again that we were just been talking about. I can't find it. So, am I sharing it again? I hope. Or am I sharing my
That's
email?
your email.
All right, I'll bring it down. One of the things you find about ballot measures like this is that the audiences that tend to be more motivated about something like this will tend to carry the day. So I guess the question back to you, and I don't live in Kenmore, so I don't know where the motivations were. This suggests to me that the disagree had a stronger groundswell going on here, right? But I don't, anytime something's 47-53, you can't really guarantee it one way or another, right? Especially with this survey, that's margin of error stuff. So you could just as easily make an argument to me statistically that it could have passed. At the same time, this isn't a ballot measure, right? This is a concept that we tested. And a ballot measure would look very different, I imagine, in the city. So, would it have included funding? Would it have included regulations and zoning and all the rest of that? I don't know what else would have included. So there's a lot of hypotheticals built on there.
I like it. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Lutzis?
Just curious, running off of that, how does that result compare to the results on, I think, slide 23? The one that says the city should be responsible only for planning for affordable housing projects versus the city should not just plan, but take active steps.
I think you might still be on the longer presentation, right?
I thought this one was presented.
It was, but you said slide 23, and that's in the longer one.
Sorry,
the short. That's fine. I caught up. I know which one you're talking
city's
about.
role in affordable housing. It's the green bar at 61%.
Yep.
Blue bar at
Yeah.
28%.
So I'm sorry. I was making sure I was looking at the right data. What could you restate the question?
Yeah. So I know that we just discussed in one of the other breakdowns that it says that's about 50-50 in terms of the city working with developers to subsidize and provide affordable housing. Yet this figure seems to sort of counter that a little bit. I know that it's not exactly the same wording, but there's some similar themes there. And how can those be reconciled with one another?
Yeah. I mean, I think these are complex issues. I don't know if you're asking me, if the ballot measure looked like this instead, would it have passed?
Not exactly the ballot measure, but just in the other bar about the agree, strongly agree, oppose, strongly oppose. It's about 50-50 when it comes to the city's role in affordable housing. But in this other one about which one is closer more to your opinion, it's, certainly more significant.
Yeah, I think, when you think about, and this happens in polling and it happens in focus groups all the time, is that there's nuanced levels to each of these questions. So one of the benefits of a forced choice is it eliminates all those other options, right? The forced choice and I really should share it with you so I can make my point clearer. Hold on while I do that. I'm going to abandon the idea of actually PowerPoint presentation sharing. I'm just gonna share what I've got on my screen because that's going to be easier to see. So you should be able to see it now. Yes?
Yes, that one.
Okay. So remember, when we're thinking about a survey progression, right? The person that we're talking to is either hearing or seeing only the questions that we're relying on to see at the time that we're seeing them. And it goes in a progression, right? So they're not always going to remember exactly what came before it. So this question that comes before any of the agree disagrees, right? It comes as a more generic, what do you think about this? And it eliminates any of the other choices. It gives you only two. It gives you the city should be responsible or city should not just plan, right? So yeah, I might agree with that at the first time you asked me, but then you asked me a few questions later. All right, well, what if we did this thing? And the forced choice is now not the rule anymore, right? I don't have to just stick with my two choices. I get now four choices. And I'm asked about something individually. So both things can be true at the same time, that I can say, this is my general idea of what I just had two choices in hand. But if you tell me, like, what would I think about this? Yeah, well, I might be okay with it. You see what I'm saying? I hope I'm making sense. But the challenge becomes that when you look at slide 15, well, I'm only giving you two choices. And now when I get to here, I've forgotten all about that. I'm like, well, now you're just asking me to give my opinion on should the city be working with developers to subsidize building more housing in Kenmore? Yes, that might be counterproductive to this, but when you phrase it this way, all right, well, maybe I'm on board. So that's the way I talk about it. Is the forced choices aren't perfect. They give us a general sense of it. When you ask them more agree disagrees, we get closer. But even then, the 47-53, like we just talked about, there's a margin of error associated with that even. So it's all about trying to get a sentiment of when we actually start to drill down on these details, where do people end up?
Thank you.
Questions? All right, I'm not seeing any more questions. Councilmember Sassen.
Really just a quick comment. I just really dig data-driven decision-making, and this is really so helpful in terms of framing the conversation for me. I don't have a question. I just have, I just find this extremely helpful. So thank you.
Happy to hear it and glad that it was helpful.
Councilor Marshall?
Yes, I echo it. It's very important. It's scientific. I also appreciate your acknowledgement of that significant margin of error and that this is not a perfect tool.
Any further questions? All right. Thank you very much.
You bet. Have a good night, everybody.
All right, and last study session item, ballot measure options presented by City Manager Rob Carr Lindsay and Community Development Director Debbie Bent.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. This is a continuation of the conversation we had at the retreat. The FSP task force did some work on this, as you know, they came up with some options for potentially going to the voters. And then also all this Love Where You Live work that's been done has also helped us culminate up to this point. So Debbie Bent, our Community Development Director, has some slides to take us through some options and kind of maybe more refined options based on our discussions at the retreat.
Well, there are 10 slides. This is the first one as an introduction, so we'll go straight to the second one. There we go. So funding strategies background, why are we needing to look at funding strategies? And as mentioned by the FSP task force, there are, and also by Mayor Herbig, there are sort of limits on what the city can do on raising revenue, including the 1% limit on property tax. And that limit has caused some issues because there have been some larger than anticipated increase in public safety and other factors. And so the city was facing a structural deficit in its operating budget. And that's what the FSP task force was tasked with. What can we do to fix that? So to identify funding needs, you had engagement through the FSP task force. You had the community engagement, and you've just heard those results. And you also had a human services needs assessment, and you just recently received those results as well. So let's take a quick look at funding needs that were identified in terms of parks. And as the FSP task force mentioned, parks maintenance, parks and facilities maintenance, it has a large impact on the general fund. And also if there are new park facilities planned, such as acquisition and development of a new park, and the one that's been on everybody's mind recently has been Lake Point. So again, what informed this? Well, the Love Where You Live project showed strong support for outdoor recreation and access to the water, and also some kind of development at Lake Point, and Lauren just shared those results with you. There was support on the statistically valid survey. 54% showed some support, and I think as you saw in the survey results, 22% was strong support. For public safety, again, you're aware of the increased public safety costs. Also, how to fund continued participation in the Regional Crisis Response Program, or RACER, and how to continue participation in the Community Court Program. The engagement support in the statistically valid survey, maintaining public safety and combating crime, was ranked as the highest priority compared to other city services. For human services, in the results that were presented from the human needs assessment, funding a community resource navigator to coordinate community access to existing housing and human services ranked very high. Expanding community services such as utility bill assistance to help those lower income residents, and that was also presented to you from the FSP task force. So the engagement support also identified the need for how to get the community access to the services which are out there, how to reach those services, what are the barriers to those services. And again, to access those services, the Community Resource Service Navigator was identified as a top funding priority out of that needs assessment. So the financial, I won't spend a lot of time on this because the FSP task force did a fantastic job of presenting their recommendations. But what I want to focus on is potential ballot measures. And I think what we're looking for this evening is direction on whether there should be a ballot measure in November of this year. And the FSP task force recommended formation of a metropolitan park district. So to put that on the ballot to form the MPD, so that structure is available, and then levy a very small levy at first that would take effect in 2026, with the potential for a second higher levy that could be implemented later. And again, they stress the very big if on this as well, is if those key elements for a park proposal on Lake Point come together. They also talked about two other potential ballot measures: a public safety property tax levy lid lift in 2027, which would take effect in 2028. And in 2028, a 1.1% public safety sales tax, which would be approved by the voters in 2027 or later. So when we came to the retreat, we also talked about some other options for ballot measures. But what this slide shows is how that would line out based on the FSP task force recommendations, showing when the vote would occur, when the rate would go, and when those rates would go into effect. And as a reminder, we've just kind of outlined on there that we're still trying to move forward with the due diligence for Lake Point, and anticipate that that due diligence and development of a plan would probably take till at least 18 months, maybe up to 2 years. So we did talk at the retreat about some other potential ballot measures, and you can kind of, there's many different combinations in terms of years to put them on the ballot and a combination. And at the retreat, we talked about potential for a public police and public safety levy lid lift combined with the RACER program, or a public safety regional crisis RACER program and human services levy lid lift. So there are many combinations there. The FSP task force, though, was not recommending a levy lid lift for the human services. They were recommending that would be a sort of a councilmanic effort in 2026 to fund either the utility rebate or that resource navigator position. So what would staff recommend on this? Well, staff would recommend following the FSP task force recommendation for placing a metropolitan park district on the ballot in 2024 to help offset some of those parks costs and the impact on the general fund. However, we would only recommend that you do that if there is a united and a strong majority council support to place this ballot measure. I think it's important when there is a ballot measure that there is united and a majority council support to kind of give that leading direction. So without this, if there is not a strong support for placing the MPD on the ballot this year, or for placing one of the alternative measures on the ballot this year, the option B approach then would be to use one-time fund balance in 2025 and 2026 to temporarily sustain ongoing costs, and to have one-time special project funds could be used for human services needs. So what do we do next? Well, I think this evening what staff would be hoping for is, if there is no strong majority council support for a ballot measure, we would like to know that this evening. If you still need more information or would like to discuss this further, then we would bring this back to the next council meeting, which would be on May 20th. And in those intervening weeks, we would then tell the public, here's some of the options that the council is still considering, or the council has decided not to place a ballot measure in November 2024 and will consider a future ballot measure at a later date. We'll continue then to hear from the public throughout May and early June. And in mid-June, then the council direction would be to put a measure on the ballot for November. Or we would be no resolution if the city council chooses to not move forward. So again, that's kind of the options presented, and any questions and discussion at this time. Thank you.
Councilor Marshall.
The MPD could be used later then for Lake Point possibly, and or the whole plan of purchasing the perimeter property we were talking about, right?
It could, that is an option. I think what you would need to do if you were placing the MPD on the ballot, you would have to be very clear and transparent about what the levy would be and when and if you would put a lift on that levy, whether it's for Lake Point acquisition or some other park project.
Further discussion? Councilor Sassen.
Thank you. I know it's late, so I appreciate your attention to this. I feel like my thinking has evolved since the retreat, and specifically regarding the MPD and this timing. What I'm putting together right now is that parks fall in the city services between core and basic and enhanced. All of our public safety, and I would wrap Racer and the human services in with public safety, falls in core, which I feel like in my thinking tonight, those are services that people should expect to be covered by the city without even though we've had this massive bump in public safety costs, but they should expect those to be covered within the city budget whenever possible. And this may or may not be that time. But in terms of an MPD, which I am very much in favor of, as being a tool, being a placeholder now and a tool for the future with statistically significant 54% support, and parks falling in basic services, I would be in favor of introducing that as a remedy at this time.
Deputy Mayor.
I really want to thank you for organizing this so well for us. I definitely support exploring the MPD further. Yeah, I thought, and the way this tied together with the previous presentation is very useful with what we saw with the support. So, and yeah, I think I would really like to have discussion on the 20th on this.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, I guess for me, I need to have a really compelling reason to go to the voters. I feel like when we get further along in the Lake Point process, I mean, right now, you know, we're in the beginning of an 18-month process. That would be a time, you know, if it looks promising that we could go forward, that there would be a kind of a compelling story of why we would need additional resources. I'm not seeing that at this point. I think it would be a challenging communication issue. I mean, I'd love to get the MPD in place. Don't get me wrong. I think it's the right tool and we will eventually need it. I don't know how or why. I don't know how to make that case in 2024. I think that would be very difficult to do.
Councilor Lutz.
Yeah. Well, so I think, at least for me, it's important to remember that this is the recommended path by the Financial Sustainability Plan Task Force. They did a lot of the heavy lifting already, community engagement over the course of so many weeks, 10 meetings and everything. Taking in a lot of that feedback and considering the appetite of voters. And I think it's really important to consider their work, especially with a lot of their professional backgrounds and the work that city staff is doing behind the scenes to support that. And I know for me, at least personally, I spoke at the retreat. in favor actually of a path similar to this. And the reasons that in particular this stuck out to me was because it is far more minimal than a significant lift such as the public safety and human services one that we were also considering, which was 28 cents, which seemed way too high, especially this late in the process. And that's sort of echoing what Councilmember Culver said earlier on this evening, was I do recognize that we are getting very close to that. And so I think it's important to remember, kind of balance that, how big of an ask versus how much time we have to prepare that. And so I think this is certainly more manageable, especially when considering that it would go towards services that the city provides, which would, in this case, would be supporting our parks, which I think is important. But I also want to emphasize too that, you know, the only reason why I'm open to this as well, especially at this time, is because we are going to the voters. It's not something that's councilmanic at this time, and we're listening to hear what people say, and they have the power to say no. Or if they think that this is a priority and manageable and reasonable, they can say yes too. And I just looking ahead at making sure that we don't fall below that line and doing what we can to prevent that, while also, you know, allowing our residents to make their voices heard and to decide through a vote.
Before I get to other people second time, so I'm just. Okay. Yeah, speaking for myself, I appreciate the work that went into all this. I am very wary of forming an MPD without a clear vision of what it's for and just essentially using it to replace general fund. I think it's a tool that we will need at some point, but I think a more compelling story can be told if we actually have a solid project that we can take to the voters. I don't think coming to them and saying we just need more money for parks is a compelling story personally. So I'm not super excited about the idea of going to the ballot this year, just to start an MPD for the sake of starting an MPD. I would rather do it when we have something more solid that we can present to the voters. I think that's why Walkways and Waterways was successful. And also, if we create an MPD just to create an MPD, then we're still gonna have to go back to the voters if, you know, Lake Point comes, if we've cleared all the hurdles and we can move forward with Lake Point, we have to go to the voters for a second time. So I don't think, especially knowing that down the line, we will have to probably go to the voters for public safety. Can't say that I'm supportive right now of going to the voters in 2024 with kind of just to create an MPD for the sake of creating an MPD. We'll have to do it at some point. Don't question that. I think we need a better story to tell with it. Circling back, Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, and I apologize. I misunderstood. I thought we were just supposed to be asking questions at the beginning, and I didn't state my opinion for that reason. I was just trying to adhere to it, so I'm sorry for everybody for that. And I don't want to detract from any perception of lack of enthusiasm. I fully support bringing the MPD before the public. I think Councilmember Lutzis made a lot of good points on that, as did Councilmember Sassoon. I think the compelling story is, if it's still true, we can not only use this as an important tool that we will be able to use later, but I think if it's still true that we can use it for development of some new park in the downtown core. Is that going to be right? That's possible. Okay, that's my story.
It's possible, if I can just kind
Yeah,
of say that.
You bet.
I guess it depends on what you want. So to me, it's kind of a cascading question here. Do you want to put a ballot measure on? And if it's the MPD, then the next discussion would be, and what does that ballot measure look like? Is it just to take care of existing costs, or do we need to put something else on there? And if it's that something else, I'm not sure what it would be, but we'd have to be clear about that. So that gets into me would be a later discussion once you've made the decision of going forward, because then I think the discussion has to be, how is that ballot measure worded? What exactly is going on the ballot for this time in terms of parks projects? Are we promising to do something on the ballot measure? Or are we saying it could be used for something in the future and being sort of vague about that? It could be used to fund Lake Point, and that would be coming back later with a future lift. So again, how this is described, again, I think would be the next step once you've decided you want to do it.
Excellent. So yeah, that gives me a reason then to say, okay, yeah, we have a couple of great options, either the future use of Lake Point, or again, my compelling reason is I was very glad to hear from Ms. Loyak about the small park that was going to go into the new development. But we have our family housing project that we're looking at coming in, and I really feel that, man, these are the kids who are going to need a little playground the most. I think we owe it to them for a humane and nice Kenmore. I mean, if they don't have it in their facility already, I don't see how it can hurt. If we're going to grow smart, grow with heart. That's my story, is like, man, we got to get something for kids who need it in the center of town.
Deputy Mayor?
Sorry for the pause. A couple of things. First, I have a question for our city manager. I've forgotten, when do we expect to hear back about the conservation teachers grant?
There's several steps. There's when we first hear from the advisory committee, and I think we should be hearing what their recommendations are probably in a month or so. And then the county executive makes recommendations to the county council in September, and then the county council finally approves in November-ish, no later than December. But we'll get a pretty good indication from the advisory committee in a month or so.
Thank you. That's what I thought I recalled. So that's good to know. Another piece, I do think that the point that was made by Councilmember Lutzis and Marshall about this is going to the voters. It's a voter decision. I think that is compelling. The piece that I think is important for us also to consider with the survey is the survey actually put some money to this measure. That was actually more than I think what we would actually even raise to if we were to proceed with some purchase of the Lake Point property. So we're talking about a 5-cent MPD to set up the framework, but it's 5 cents that will have some form of a cap, which we as a council would have to discuss. And even if we have a cap to say, what if our cap was 46 cents, like on that survey, which is lower than the 75. If we were to set a cap, whether or not the MPD uses that council manically to raise that levy or go to the voters for that second increase, we as a council could make that decision at that point in time when it's necessary. I also think part of this is actually us really giving consideration to, I think the framework for an MPD is very important for the longevity as the Financial Sustainability Task Force brought forward. And I'm really glad that we're talking about this. I feel like I can say that where we are today from last Friday, I'm really happy with the way the shift has moved with this conversation. This is what I wanted to share. I recognize the reservations of making sure that we have a compelling measure before the people. So I hear that there is a part of me, as much as I'm very gung-ho about this, I hear you, and I do see that there is a case be made for having a complete bond measure or, measure. So I definitely have heard that, but I think that we have a lot of evidence based on the survey work and community engagement that we could present a measure to the people that would pass. That is in the long-term best interest of our city. And yes, we should have something that we're creating with that 5 cents, something that hasn't been seen before. So, thank you.
All right, before going to our next comments, without any objection, Council Rule 2.9 would be waived to allow us to extend our meeting. Is there objections? Yes, because it is 11:03. Objections, Rule 2.9 is waived. Councilmember Culver and then Councilmember Shubnik.
Yeah, just jumping in on the feedback piece, because, you know, we did hear from a lot of the community and we got a lot of obviously feedback from Financial Sustainability Task Force and the work that they did, et cetera. I go back to this point though, that this was really very centered around Lake Point, and it's still a maybe, but anything could happen. But to me, the priorities say a lot. Like the fact that this was sort of the big year and it didn't take off, it stayed, right? That to me says like I want to honor their work, right? And I want to honor the community inputs, et cetera. But I don't know. It doesn't feel to me that it's perfectly in sync with where we kept our priorities, I guess. Complicated topic. So I'll stop there, but yeah, y'all know where I'm at on this, so yeah.
Councilmember Shubnik.
Yeah, as I said before, I think that the compelling story is key. It is a little bit hard to say, do you want to do this ballot measure or not, acontextually, without knowing what the heck the ballot measure would be about. So, what would that 5 cents fund? What would 10 cents fund? If we're simply talking about existing maintenance of parks, I think we would have to make a pretty compelling story that because of waterways and walkways, that our maintenance needs are greater, and by how much. For example, my favorite topic, aquatic weeds. We were not doing anything about them, or very, very little, before waterways and walkways, and now we're going to do substantially more. So what does that cost? So that would be something we could clearly articulate and tie to priorities, right? If we're going to add an amenity, like, are we actually going to go with phase 2 of City Hall Park? I mean, that would be a huge new thing and very desirable to the community. It fills a gap in our parks, planning, clearly serves a need. Trails were a huge priority in the Love Where You Live, process. Love Where You Live, the one that we just did, not for the love of Kenmore. So are there trail pieces that we would be putting in there? Those are all new things. And that doesn't really get back to the fundamental issue that the FSP brought up, which is, using an MPD just to fill a general fund gap, which I do not think is a compelling story. So I have very mixed feelings, particularly in the absence of knowing what we were even talking about.
Councilmember Sassen.
I think the task force today was pretty clear about making recommendations, but not claiming to know all the answers on prioritization, timing, approval modalities. And so not, at risk of overstepping, not hearing massive unanimous yes this fall, could we go back to the other recommendations that they made? Could we go back a couple slides to setting ballot measure aside? What what other measures need rest? And is that something that we will do tonight, or is that something that we're gonna do it down the road? We get to ferment that a little bit.
I think that would be a little further
Yes.
down the road. I think today the question was more
Perfect, that's great.
November or no November,
Okay,
because that's a whole different discussion that could take quite a bit of time.
okay, I'm happy. I don't need to, if we have a plan to have that other discussion down the road, I'm happy. I don't need to do it now. But I will need to see this.
I'm sorry, what is that other discussion down the road?
I believe it's implementing having council figure out what parts of the FSP recommendations and timing and all that. And that's something, when we did the FSP last time around, that was something that that came to us, and then, we talked about it with staff, and then it got digested down a bit, and then we picked and choose what we were gonna do, and then we stuck to that plan. But yeah, it's gonna take a little bit of time, and I think we'll work that out through budget probably.
Yeah, can I briefly speak to that?
Of course.
Yeah, and at first I was thinking that we'd just come back to you in June and have you adopt a modified or same version of the FSP task force recommendations, but you may recall from 4 years ago, they finished their work nicely in the late summer, early September. It timed nicely with the budget. So my recommendation is that we do the same, where we take the summer to work through the budget and then bring forth the FSP plan for you to adopt in tandem with the budget.
Deputy Mayor?
And I genuinely think it's important that we continue this discussion. I thought I saw 4 people interested in continuing this discussion, at least late at our next council meeting. I didn't interpret it the same as Councilmember Sassen. So I think that this is such an important decision that we should bring it back. Yeah, MPD. Yeah, I think it's important that we,
MPD like this November?
yeah. I personally think it's important that we have continued discussion. It is very late. I also heard from the way I interpreted what the task force said was creating the foundation for an MPD and opening the door in the event of Lake Point using it. So I think it is connected. I think we have potential to create a story. We don't have to. As I said, I might be okay with, I like the idea of going this year. At the same time, I see benefit to having a slower process, but I think it's very important that we continue this conversation because we've made it this far. And I would not feel comfortable if we stopped it tonight.
Yeah, I do think we probably do have 4 folks that have expressed interest in continuing the conversation, and I'm not opposed to adding that to the agenda on the 20th, just kind of towards the end of your study session sort of thing. But I also tend to agree with staff that we need to have more. I mean, I would really hope that it would not be a 4-3 vote to go to the ballot. That would not be ideal, in my humble opinion. So any further discussion? All right. Thank you very much. Staff report?
Nothing else.
That is the correct answer to 11:11. Council member reports. Councilmember Culver.
What City Manager Rob Carlindsey said.
Councilmember Marshall.
Nothing to report.
Councilmember Sassen.
NUSA Housing Online Lunch and Learn on the 14th, which is Tuesday. Councilmember Strebnick and I are looking to host it in person, and that will be to be announced, I think. Maybe you have updates.
Councilmember Strebnick.
Yeah, we got to get a room. No other updates, thanks.
Councilor Lucis.
Two quick things. I promise I'll keep it quick. Just a committee update from the Seashore Transportation Forum. King County Metro is recruiting student interns for their Student Transit Champions undergraduate internship for this summer. It's full time, so just putting that out there for students in our community who might be interested. And then the other thing was the AWC's Center for Quality Community Communities has recently put out a call to council members and other local elected officials for their Washington Collaborative Elected Leaders Institute. It's free. It's about how to promote unison in our communities and overcome the increasing political divide and polarization we have nationally. So it's a series of workshops that brings together elected officials all across the state, and it's free, and it's just a way that I think might be beneficial. It talked about signing up in you know, 2s and 3s. So I think they want more than one from each city. So that was something I'm interested in. And I'm curious to know if others might be interested in that as well. Although I can follow this up with an email with more information and kind of summarize what AWC was saying.
Yeah, why don't you forward the AWC email to everybody and we can maybe discuss it on the 20th. I'm not sure what the deadline is, but.
Yeah, it's coming up. I think it's a couple weeks. I can't remember if it's the
Okay.
17th or 19th or something like that.
Okay. Well, let's circulate it by email and.
Sounds good. Thank you. Nothing else.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It does sound interesting. Nothing else. I'm gonna just let this one go. Thank you.
Yeah, I have nothing to report either. The McMaster Awards were great. It was wonderful to see the folks there, and it's always fun to honor the people that make this city so great. So anyway, with nothing more to come before us, we are adjourned.